Chapter 201. The next morning, the city gate of Rosetta was bustling with activity. At dawn, the delegation from St. Maester officially arrived in Rosetta, along with the long-detained gemstone necklace caravan. Gulacy and the others stayed in Akkot for a week. During this week, other than not being able to leave without permission, there were no special restrictions. When the Akkot family set off, they didn't bring them along because the caravan was too long, so they could only follow the Nuwa-Ayers team back after Liberation Day. Missing the festival wasn't a big deal. After all, it was Rosetta's new year. But this time, following the Nuwa-Ayers team back, Gulacy, who had collected a lot of information, was anxious. That's right, Gulacy was anxious because she heard something. If it was true, then her miss would be in a serious situation. When can I return to my post? Have we already entered the city? The maid who was detained in the carriage angrily complained to the soldiers, but the soldiers strictly forbade everyone from leaving the carriage. Gulacy looked at Bishop Philip, who was chatting in front of her, and sighing at the unique scenery of Rosetta. In the end, she didn't choose to force her way in. Miss? Gulacy looked into the distance and muttered to herself. At this time, in the city hall, the elegantly dressed Xia Luot was receiving Nuwa-Ayer, who came to inquire, as well as the many legal personnel of the Holy See behind her. After entering the city today, the investigation and inquiry team of St. Maester, who was tasked with the mission of Akkot Domain's proxy lord kidnapping case, set off together. Under the leadership of Nuwa-Ayer, they aggressively came to the city hall to summon Xia Luot. Luoya temporarily stayed in the Hundred Birds Hall due to physical inconvenience, and the Holy See personnel took the initiative to visit and collect evidence. Xia Luot was already prepared for the princess's fist technique. Behind him, the legal team of the Luo city government was on standby. The confrontation between the two sides was white-hot. According to Article 4 of the National Security Law of the Theocracy of St. Maester, when a local lord is kidnapped, resulting in the restriction of his freedom, the theocracy and the Highscourt royal family must take action and use all possible means to arrest, punish, and escort the criminal to the capital of the theocracy for trial. Now we suspect that Miss Xia Luot Serofia of the United Nations is suspected of violating this safety law and has been charged with several charges. In the case of factual evidence, we have the right to forcibly arrest her. The white-haired old judge of the theocracy opened with an intimidating and threatening speech. His temperament and confidence in upholding justice for many years made him high-spirited. Even if everyone present knew that forcible arrest was nonsense, they still couldn't help but be shocked by the toughness in his words. However, as the saying goes, the east wind can't suppress the west wind. The theocracy's attitude was tough, but Luo Seti's attitude wasn't weak either. Under the gaze of the judge, an old man with a white beard stood up shakily. It was the former head of the Luo Seti legal department. The old man took a deep breath and stood up straight. He didn't back down and refute it. According to the special clause in the White Paper on Strategic Cooperation between the Rose Business United Nations and the Akkot territory, when the children of one party encounter danger or suffer serious injuries during war, the other party has the responsibility and obligation to provide them with a safe environment and complete treatment. Now that the eastern region is at war, Marquis Kadia of Akkot territory is one of the participants, which means that Akkot territory is in an abnormal state of war. In this state, Miss Xia Luot Serofia of the United Nations determined that Akkot territory couldn't provide complete treatment when Marquis Kadia is not present. It is reasonable, and legal to bring him to Luo Seti for treatment. As for the crime and kidnapping, it is a misunderstanding caused by poor communication between the two sides. Please be careful with your words. The two old men, whose combined age was more than 200 years old, glared at each other across the table. Their 4 eyes were like light bulbs, and after the one who took the lead rushed forward, the support personnel and assistants at the back also began to do their best. The so-called White Paper on Strategic Cooperation between the Rose Commercial United Nations and the Akkot territory is just a private agreement signed between the local feudal lord and a foreign country. It has no legal effect on the St. Maester theocracy. The national security law is much higher than it. According to the Third Agreement of Human Countries, the local law is the priority to adjudicate the private disputes between the local lords. The strategic agreements between the territories have discretion. The Luoya Akate incident this time is an international incident that affects the stability of the theocracy of Saint Maester and the authority of Nuaire Princess Heidekrit. It cannot be defined as a private matter between the lords. Please do not mislead the public. A fierce confrontation took place in the legal office. The two sides involved were the top legal talents of the two countries. For a time, the laws were flying everywhere. Books after books were flipped. The laws of the theocracy of Saint Maester, the laws of Akate territory, the laws of the United Nations of Saint Maester, and even the Strategic Alliance and the Human Common Agreement were used as cannonballs. The Chief Justice of the theocracy, Koster, and the former legal officer of the United Nations of Saint Maester, Karu, were arguing tit for tat. They refuted each other and gradually became angry. One was gnashing his teeth, while the other was glaring. In a situation where they were evenly matched, the two sides were no longer just trying to get a man for their little mistress. This battle gradually evolved into a direct confrontation between the legal system of the theocracy of Saint Maester and the legal system of the United Nations of Saint Maester and the legal system of the United Nations of Saint Maester. If they lost, not only would Xia Luot and Nuaire be dissatisfied, they would also be unable to raise their heads in front of the other side in the future. For 3 hours, neither side had the upper hand in the war of words. Although the investigation team of the Nuaire was attacking, whether it was the crime of Xia Luot or the possible violation of the law, they could not be established under the cover of the United Nations of Saint Maester. The reddish-brown-haired girl took a sip of tea. She was not surprised by this result. In fact, she had put in a lot of effort for this day. Everyone on the United Nations of Saint Maester was an experienced defense expert. The former legal officer, Karu, was personally invited by Bruce. How could they lose? The condition for the establishment of a restriction of personal freedom is that the person being restricted has the will to move freely. During the journey of Miss Xia Luot and young Master Luoya Akate, we have strictly consulted their will. We even carried out activities such as stargazing and other entertainment activities. There is no doubt that this does not meet the definition of a kidnapping. After another round of debate, the theocracy of Saint Maester still did not make any progress. Chief Justice Koster turned his head to look at the princess sitting behind him. His eyes moved slightly as he nodded. I see. Then we will temporarily put aside the criminal complaint of Xia Luot. Next, we will inquire about the marriage between Xia Luot and Luoya Akate. As soon as the Chief Justice said this, the hall fell into silence. The legal personnel on the United Nations of Saint Maester's side looked at each other and gradually relaxed. There was no other reason other than the fact that although marriage contracts were formulated based on the marriage laws of various countries, they were basically at the edge of the law. Generally speaking, there wouldn't be any problems. Under the circumstances where Charlotte wasn't convicted, it was almost impossible to overturn it. If asked, it would be resolute in fulfilling it. The most difficult moment had passed. It seemed that the United Nations of Saint Maester needed to rest and adjust. With this thought in mind, the legal personnel who had been fighting for a few hours heaved a sigh of relief. It was almost noon. After working for so long, some of them were already thinking about lunch. In the midst of this silence, Chief Justice Koster asked in a clear voice. Chapter 202. Luoya was a little worried when he heard that Ai Lizzie had taken on the task of curing the life exhaustion. After all, in his heart, Ai Lizzie was still a girl who needed protection. She had never shown her extraordinary power in front of Luoya. Oh no, she had shown it before. Occasionally, the girl would lean on him and do maintenance on the ancient books when he was reading. This was probably the time when Ai Lizzie showed her curse to Luoya the most. But the problem was that this curse could be used as low as source rank 6, so he couldn't see its level at all. Because of this, Luoya didn't leave everything to Ai Lizzie. Instead, he called Old Man Andrew and asked him to see if Ai Lizzie's bloodline talisman met the requirements. When the white-haired Old Man Andrew walked through the door and looked at Ai Lizzie beside the boy, Luoya's heart couldn't help but jump. But in the next moment, Andrew's old eyes widened. What's going on? Can it really be found? Is this possible? The old man who had lived for more than 100 years and had never seen such a special bloodline used a curse to stare at Ai Lizzie carefully. He found that the life energy in the girl's body was far beyond that of an ordinary person. Seeing this, Andrew breathed a sigh of relief and had an expression of gratitude. Luoya could be saved. Not only was Luoya happy, but the experts who had been thinking about how to save him were also happy. One must know that the Akot family had already arrived in Rosetta City. Andrew and the others were under a lot of pressure. They scratched their ears and cheeks every day, trying to figure out how to cure him. But unfortunately, going bald couldn't solve the problem. It could only reflect the light in front of the problem. When Old Man Andrew was young, he didn't work, so his white hair was still elegant and thick. But his beard couldn't stand it anymore. Every day, when he thought about problems, he would stroke his beard. Whenever there was a problem, he would use force. In the past 2 days, he had pulled out more than 20 hairs. So when he saw AI Lizzie, he was as excited as seeing a relative. Child, your situation should meet the standard. Don't be nervous. Can you materialize your life force? At this moment, Luoya, who was beside AI Lizzie, suddenly felt refreshed and excited for no reason. In his perception, AI Lizzie was like a silver moon. Boundless vitality overflowed around her, making Luoya feel as if he was immersed in a cold spring. He felt refreshed. At the same time, the silver-haired girl opened her eyes in a timely manner. She gently raised her hand, and a little bird formed from white energy appeared out of thin air, standing on her palm and looking around. Andrew's dim old eyes widened at the sight, and he almost jumped up and cheered. This is too shocking. I didn't think that life energy could be refined to such a degree. The old man took a few steps forward, took out a magnifying glass from his pocket, and observed the little bird in AI Lizzie's hand. It was obvious that he had never seen such a scene before. The silver-haired girl, who had proven her ability to treat Luoya, smiled when she saw this. The black-haired boy also heaved a sigh of relief. Incredible. Is this the special bloodline of the life type recorded in the book? It feels more exaggerated than the records, Andrew said to himself excitedly, but Luoya smiled bitterly at the side. The old man probably didn't know that AI Lizzie's real bloodline ability was at night. It was now daytime. Strictly speaking, it was the time when her bloodline ability was the weakest. Grandpa Andrew, look at AI Lizzie's situation. It's enough. It's completely enough. What's the specific treatment method? Is it to use any curse vessel? No, life energy is not curse power. The curse vessel is difficult to bear. The specific treatment method is formulated according to the strength of the bloodline. Andrew put down the magnifying glass and carefully explained to Luoya, the patient. According to the ancient records, the dew of the tree of life was also divided into grades. The high-grade dew could be applied externally, and it didn't even need to be drunk. The low-grade dew not only needed to be drunk, but also needed to find several medicines to enhance the effect. However, as the saying goes, every medicine has its own side effect. No matter how the treatment was done, there would be side effects if the dosage was wrong. And what are the side effects if the dosage is too high? About this, Andrew, who was asked this question, looked a little hesitant. He glanced at AI Lizzie, who was also looking at him curiously. After struggling for a long time, he felt that he should explain it clearly. Life energy is the basic power of creatures. There is not much side effect if there is too much. It's just energetic, especially energetic. Does it mean that you can't sleep at night? Luoya asked tentatively. Andrew was embarrassed when he heard the words. It's true that you can't sleep, but it's not that kind of insomnia. Too much life energy, will greatly stimulate the reproductive function and desire of creatures. In fact, the density of animals near the tree of life is very high, and they will consciously act as the guardians of the tree of life. It should be the reason why it is conducive to the reproduction of creatures. As for the treatment of the special bloodline, the principle should be similar. The old man's voice echoed in the room. Luoya couldn't help but feel embarrassed when he heard this explanation. On the other side, the silver-haired girl suddenly widened her eyes. Her crimson pupils emitted light, and she looked at the young man on the side deeply. Then, she immediately lowered her head to cover it up, and her eyes flickered. This, Master Andrew, as long as it's not too much, it should be fine, right? Indeed, what I said should be the case of excess. As long as you control it carefully, it should not be so serious. How should I do it specifically? Ugh, it's not written in this record, but it doesn't matter. We can try it. There are only a few methods. Chapter 203. Xiaoluo Tsurophia had never thought that she would one day encounter such a huge problem. According to the marriage law of the Russian Merchant Union, there is indeed no problem with the two parties entering into a marriage contract. However, according to the marriage law of the Saint Mestre theocracy, the longest marriage contract signed by the nobles of the theocracy is 150 years, and it must be within 3 generations. In the legal office, the theocracy's chief Judge Koster calmly read out this law, causing all the members of the Russian Merchant Union to widen their eyes. At the back, the reddish-brown girl's face stiffened, and she almost couldn't believe her ears. As of now, Xiaoluo and Luo Ye's marriage contract had only been signed for a little over 100 years, and it was still far from the 150 years limit. However, that wasn't the main point. It was the so-called within 3 generations. Back then, Lord Bran Akkad of Akkad, who was also Luo Ye's grandfather, was only in his 20s when he helped the Russian Merchant Union to establish the kingdom. At that time, the head of the Tsurophia family, Dindit Tsurophia, was almost 60 years old, more than 30 years older than Bran. Although in this world, extraordinaries in their 50s were considered to be in their prime, it was obvious that they weren't from the same generation. When the marriage contract was signed, Dindit's daughter was already in her 40s and was already married. Naturally, he didn't want to marry off his daughter, but rather his granddaughter. However, Bran was already married at that time, so the marriage contract was postponed. However, when the marriage contract was extended to 100 years later, there was a huge problem. Luo Ye Akkad, as Bran's grandson, was the 3rd generation and was within the marriage contract's validity. However, Xiaoluo Tsurophia was Dindit's great-granddaughter, so she was the 4th generation. In other words, the marriage contract was invalid in Xiaoluo's generation. When the theocracy mentioned this fact, all the members of the Russian Merchant Union were stunned. The next moment, a loud bang came from Xiaoluo. What a joke! The reddish-brown-haired girl slammed the solid wooden table in front of her into pieces in a fit of anger. She stood up and glared at Noelle. However, the blonde girl was quite calm in the face of Charlotte's fierce attack. She took a sip of tea and looked at Charlotte and asked calmly, "What's the matter?" "What? Miss Xiaoluo, do you have any questions?" "Of course. Do you think I haven't read the laws of the theocracy before? There's no additional clause at all." Are you finally beginning to lose your mind? Have you read the original case of the marriage law of the Church of Saint Maester? If you haven't seen it, please speak carefully. We will record any slander you make. Also, Miss Xiaoluo, you seem to have misunderstood me. I didn't deny the marriage contract between the Akkad family and the Tsurophia family. I only denied you. The golden-haired angel recalled Charlot's words last night, and he happily retaliated with a smile on his face. The marriage contract between Akkad and Tsurophia is a century-old one. It has deep historical significance. Why would I break such a contract? I just want it to be carried out according to the agreement. But Xiaoluo, you can't do it, but your aunts can. Young miss, please calm down. Facing Xiaoluo, who was completely enraged by the Nuwa Iyer, the former legal officer of the Russian Merchant Union, Karu, hurriedly gestured to stop her. The experienced old man narrowed his eyes. He knew that anger was useless now. It was time to show his skills. Judge Koster, may I ask what year the 43rd Amendment to the marriage law of the Church of Saint Maester was passed? Was the original case brought? As far as I know, at least in the laws issued by the Russian Merchant Union, there is no such article. The amendment to the law was made 120 years ago in the autumn of the Third Era, in the year 890. At that time, there were many cases of marriage contract fraud. In order to stabilize the order among the nobles, the judicial system of the Church of Saint Maester made amendments to the marriage law. 4 articles were added to it. This is one of them. Judge Koster confidently brought up these old matters to increase the credibility of the Church of Saint Maester. However, Karu didn't buy it. The old man with a white beard waved his hand and angrily rebuked the judge. Ridiculous. Judge Coster, this is the sacred legal hall. Please be careful with your words. The amendment to the Church of St. Maester was made 120 years ago? Then why hasn't this section been published in the Church of St. Maester's legal code? That's because the Church of St. Maester's legal code is for all citizens. The amendment to the marriage law of the Church of St. Maester was set up separately for the nobles. It has never been printed on a large scale. However, there have been dozens of cases decided based on the amendment in the past century. This is an undeniable fact. I see. Then I will admit the existence of the amendment to the 43rd Amendment to the marriage law of the Church of St. Maester. However, I would like to question the time and jurisdiction of the amendment. In my opinion, although the amendment was made early, it was published later than the time when the marriage contract between Akkad and Sorophia was signed. On the other hand, the marriage contract between us and Akkad was signed in the territory of St. Maester, not the Church of St. Maester. Therefore, the amendment to the Church of St. Maester should not involve the Sorophia family. The former head of the legal department, Carew, had dragged the entire conference into a quagmire. At this point, both sides were completely at loggerheads, and all kinds of dirty tricks were used. Judge Coster was disgusted by low-chase close combat. He desperately emphasized the reliability and authenticity of the Church of St. Maester's law, but Carew turned a blind eye to it. He only insisted on 2 points. One was the confirmation letter from the Akkad family regarding the amendment to the law, and the other was the scope of application of the Church of St. Maester's supplementary clause. A fierce battle unfolded in the legal hall. The scene was fierce beyond imagination. However, at the back, the red-haired girl's heart was cold. In any case, her marriage contract with Luo Ya had become a major point of dispute. Before the two sides reached a conclusion, it was basically invalid. Although Xia Luo could rely on a strong legal team to not completely lose the marriage contract, she could no longer enforce it under reasonable circumstances. Xia Luo's strongest weapon was useless. The battle in the legal hall of St. Maester was fierce. On the other side, in the Sorophia manor, Ai Lizi's heart was also burning. Not long ago, when Andrew said that he could use the life energy of realization to heal, Luo Ya could be said to be relieved. After all, the bird in Ai Lizi's palm was so vivid. When it first appeared, it even made Luo Ya's body faintly resonate with it. At first glance, it was obvious that the effect was significant. If this bird went down, even if it didn't cure the disease, at least it wouldn't be far from recovery, right? The black-haired boy smiled as he thought so. Then he saw the cute bird that he had high hopes for fall in front of his eyes. Chapter 204. In the council hall, the confrontation between Xiaoluot Sorophia and Nuwa Iyer Heathcrete had entered the intermission. Due to the intense confrontation in the second half of the morning, the tension between the legal team and the Inquisition team was very strong. Therefore, the plan to have lunch together was temporarily cancelled. However, as VIPs, Nuwa Iyer and Xiaoluot's lunch couldn't be cancelled. No matter how fierce the fight was in the legal office, the nobles had to abide by the etiquette, especially when it came to a state guest like Noel who came to congratulate them. They had to be courteous to send them off. Therefore, this noon, Xiaoluot must hold her nose and sit with Nuwa Iyer, even if she couldn't wait for the woman opposite her to disappear immediately. The same situation applied to Nuwa Iyer. Miss Angel also had to be polite and respectful, even if she wanted to beat Xiaoluot up. The two young ladies with fake smiles on their faces began their lunch. From a certain point of view, this lunch could be considered peaceful. After all, both sides were very restrained. However, there was no lack of soft knives and verbal sparring. Miss Nuwa Iyer, what do you think of this wine? It's okay, but the sweetness is too strong. As expected, the taste of the Rose region doesn't suit me. It's just like the owner of this wine. This wine is called Pamela wine. It's a specialty from the southern mountains of Akkad. Xiaoluot added with a smile. As soon as the words left her mouth, the blonde girl's body stiffened. After a moment of silence, Miss Angel picked up the wine glass and took another sip. If you taste it carefully, it's not bad. Although Akkad is close to the Rose region, the taste isn't that extreme. It's just like its owner. In the face of the princess' 180-degree change in expression and the classic double standards, Charlotte was speechless. She thought for a while before readjusting her state of mind. She looked at the wine glass and said faintly, "This is a good wine that I tasted with my dear on my way back. It's very suitable for the taste of the Rose people. It's as sweet as our fateful love. I've decided to make it one of our business partners and promote it as a new summer product in various countries." Huh? Miss Yaluot, what are you talking about? Are you talking in your sleep? I'm not used to it. Facing Xiaoluot's public display of affection, Nua Iyer raised her eyebrows and sneered. "No way, Miss Xiaoluot. You don't think that it's yours just because you found it, right? Let me tell you a fact. Akkad's first business partner is Heathcliff, and it will always be Heathcliff. Our two families have signed countless contracts. As a specialty wine produced in Akkad and produced in the Saint Maester theocracy, it can only represent the common fruit of our two families. There's no need to trouble Sofia Chamber of Commerce with the promotion. Just leave it to the Vatican. After all, this is also a specialty of the Saint Maester theocracy. Your Highness Nua Iyer, you don't seem to understand the principle of business priority, but you still understand the principle of first come, first serve, right? I think you need to respect this principle of fairness based on time, especially for contracts that are 100 years in advance. Miss Yaluot, I think I've made it clear enough. I acknowledge the marriage contract signed in Akkad. It's just that the scope of the marriage contract does not include you. Please don't use your identity as Luo Ya's fiancé to flatter yourself. On the dining table, there was a crisp sound of a knife hitting the bottom of the table. Charlotte, who had been poked in her sore spot, was furious. However, she was forcefully suppressing her anger. On the other hand, Miss Angel, who was sitting opposite her, appeared calm and composed. "By the way, Miss Nua Iyer, do you know? Honey, you like to hug something when you're sleeping." Xiaoluot, who thought of something, suddenly narrowed her eyes and explained to Nua Iyer with a smile. Her bright smile was even colder than the cold light of a sword. It should be because she subconsciously lacks a sense of security. After all, my dear seems to have a lot on her mind. Every time she hugs me, I feel very warm, so warm that I hesitate to continue sleeping. However, I don't think Miss Nua Iyer has experienced this before. I'm sorry, I said something you don't understand. Xiaoluot. The golden-haired girl gritted her teeth as the young miss showed off. She took a few deep breaths to calm her emotions and also revealed a smile on her face. "By the way, I remember that year in the Holy Capital, Luoya and I formed a guardian relationship with Uncle Kadia and grandfather in front of thousands of people. Since ancient times, the approval of one's family has been an important factor in love. Speaking of which, Miss Xiaoluot, your relationship seems to have never received the blessings of your elders. This is really regrettable." Nua Iyer's words made the brown-haired girl's expression turn ugly. After a round of insulting each other, the two of them glared at each other and were so angry that they couldn't eat. In this silence, Xiaoluot's maid suddenly stepped forward and leaned over to whisper in her ear. It was news from Andrew. After giving guidance to Ai Lizi and Luoya, Grandpa naturally wanted to inform Xiaoluot of the good news of Luoya's recovery. After all, Luoya's recovery would give Luo Chet more confidence in the negotiations. Ai Lizi is actually a life force-type bloodline possessor? When Xiaoluot heard this news, she couldn't help but be surprised. She finally understood why Luoya was so calm for so long. I see. I didn't expect it to be Ai Lizi. By the way, how are they going to treat her? Grandpa Andrew said it's a body fluid therapy. Chapter 205. Do you want to keep Ai Lizi by your side forever? Luoya could answer this question without hesitation. Yes, he really wanted to, but he couldn't say it. No matter what, Luoya was Ai Lizi's older brother. In his position, he shouldn't restrict Ai Lizi's development, but encourage her to explore more. After all, the world was huge, and there were many wonderful things waiting for others to discover. But people were selfish, and Luoya was no different. The desire to keep Ai Lizi by his side every day did exist, and when Ai Lizi asked him to choose, he couldn't control his thoughts, especially after Ai Lizi's series of ambushes made him dizzy. Looking at the girl who was looking at him affectionately, Luoya knew that it was probably because of her recent experience of being kidnapped, or Xia Luo's words that provoked AI Lizzie, causing her to go berserk. But looking at the girl's tender red eyes, Luoya couldn't refuse her no matter what. AI Lizzie's beauty was soul-stirring. Although Luoya could get used to this soul-stirring, when she revealed an expression that was different from before, his defenses would be easily broken through. Yes. After hesitating for a long time, the black-haired boy still said something that he shouldn't have said. After hearing Luoya's answer, AI Lizzie was so excited that her body trembled. She hugged her lover in front of her with so much force that Luoya felt a little pain, but it also made him slightly sober. I understand, big brother as well? You want to be with AI Lizzie forever. The silver-haired girl said this in Luoya's ear. Her emotions were about to go out of control, but Luoya, who had slightly regained his senses, pressed down on her shoulder and forcefully pinched between his eyebrows to bring the topic back to the topic at hand. What else? Big brother, do you want to make me cry? Or do you want me to bleed and get hurt? No, that's not what I meant. After hearing AI Lizzie's words, Luoya stuttered and didn't know how to explain, but the silver-haired girl spoke righteously. Old Mr. Andrew said that I have to control my intake a little and not overdo it. If it's tears, I'll have to cry a few times. If there's too much life energy in the blood, it's hard to control. In the end, isn't saliva the most convenient? After listening to Elise's explanation, Roha carefully thought about it. He found that saliva was indeed easy to secrete and easy to control. The dose of life energy was also small. From the functional point of view, it was almost perfect. Okay, it's like that. But Luoya's face was red, but he didn't say anything for a long time. He said it was ambiguous, but the kiss had already broken through the boundary of ambiguity. He said it was too intimate, but it also felt a little cold towards AI Lizzie. He said it wasn't ethical, but AI Lizzie wasn't related to him by blood. Although AI Lizzie was spoiled by Luoya like a little princess in the Akkad family, and Kadia was very satisfied with her. In fact, AI Lizzie had the right to leave the Akkad family at any time after she reached adulthood. In the beginning, Kadia adopted AI Lizzie to take care of her until she reached adulthood and marry into a good family to comfort his comrade's soul in heaven. However, the series of changes that happened later made the Marquis want to digest her internally. Of course, it wasn't certain whether it was Luoya digesting AI Lizzie or AI Lizzie digesting Luoya. Elder brother, it seems that you still don't have a clear understanding of your situation. Seeing that Luoya's resistance had reached the final passive resistance and was about to be broken through, AI Lizzie was very excited, but her face was calm and serious. She seriously looked at Luoya's golden eyes, her eyes full of concern. Your current situation has already reached such a serious point. Do you still want to hold on to those meaningless feelings of shame? It's just a kiss, compared to your body, which is more important, elder brother, don't you know? Under the attack of AI Lizzie as a medical personnel, the patient Luoya was speechless for a moment. The young boy carefully thought along the girl's line of thought and realized that as a girl, AI Lizzie wasn't shy. As a man, he really shouldn't be shy. So that's how it is, I understand. Luoya nodded as if accepting his fate, and AI Lizzie, who had successfully fooled her elder brother, also smiled. She raised her hand and poured a glass of wine, downing it in one gulp, and fed Luoya again in the same way. However, behind Luoya's back, AI Lizzie's hand flashed with a pale white light. Pamela wine was mainly sweet, and due to the brewing process of this world, the alcohol content of the wine itself wasn't high. However, after drinking several glasses of wine with life energy, Luoya still felt a little strange. Head, very head. It's not the kind of head that bubbles come from the stomach, but the feeling of heat rushing through the body. The other feeling is the brain. He doesn't know if it's because of the wine and the energy complementing each other, but Roha vaguely felt a little bit. AI Lizzie, stop, I'm a little dizzy, and I don't know why, but I feel very hot. Realizing that the situation was getting worse, Luoya hurriedly called for a stop. Hearing this, the silver-haired girl raised her body meekly and hugged Luoya, but the hand behind his back increased the output of life energy in one go. Wine, ambiguous intimacy, excessive life energy, all the factors had come together one by one under AI Lizi's plan, and under the effect of this combination, Luo Ya's breathing began to become heavier and heavier, and the various side effects began to become more and more obvious. Wait. What's going on? Why is blood congested? It's just a few mouthfuls of wine. No matter what, isn't this too much? Luo Ya, who noticed the reaction, panicked. He widened his eyes and his face flushed red, trying to hide it. But what he didn't know was that AI Lizi wasn't a pure little white rabbit, but a big bad wolf that had set its sights on its prey. How could she let go of this opportunity? Big brother, what's wrong? Realizing that it was already the final moment, the girl with a smile on her face pretended not to notice and asked. Then, she looked down and slightly widened her eyes. After hesitating for a while, the girl bent down and whispered in Luo Ya's ear with a seductive fragrance. Chapter 206. When the blonde angel rushed into the door, she saw AI Lizi's body sticking to Luo Ya's body. When she saw that she was about to finish the last step and eat the dessert, she was a little upset and angry. I'm fighting with Xiaoluo in the front, and you're painting green paint on my crown? AI Lizi, don't you dare. The moment she shouted this sentence, the light wings behind Nua Iyer were already shining brightly. Her Royal Highness Princess chose to attack directly in anger. The bright light turned into a dozen golden chains, shooting at the silver-haired girl like arrows. At the same time, Xiaoluo also attacked. A crisp sound sounded on Luo Ya's body. It was the sound of the glass bottle breaking. It was also the sound of Xiaoluo's main battle curse vessel coming out of the cage. The golden soul, which stabilized Luo Ya's injury, responded to the master's curse power at this moment and bloomed with light. In an instant, the golden liquid expanded rapidly in the air, turning into a ball that wrapped Luo Ya, physically isolating AI Lizi outside. On the other side, the reddish-brown-haired girl had reached out and stroked the ring. Gem trigger. A voice with anger sounded. The gorgeous trigger curse vessel reappeared in Xiaoluo's hand after many days. The anger in the girl's heart now was no less than that of Nua Iyer. If Her Royal Highness Princess was angry because of being betrayed by her ally, then Xiaoluo was angry because of this place. This was Hundred Birds Hall, Xiaoluo's home. Being cuckolded at home, no woman could bear this kind of treatment, let alone a noble lady. Bang! Along with the sound of the trigger being pulled, the gemstone shattered into bits of light powder. An ice-cold and slow curse suddenly appeared out of nowhere and rapidly spread in Elisa's blood. The sudden arrival of the curse made Elisa's body feel as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Behind her, the golden chains had already rushed forward. Under the preemptive attack of Nua Iyer and Xiaoluo, AI Lizi could be said to be in a crisis. However, no matter how angry they were, they didn't let it get to their heads. They both understood that AI Lizi couldn't really be hurt, at least not in front of Luo Ya, so they used control spells. After the chain rushed out, Nua Iyer didn't follow up with any spells, and Xiaoluo also lowered the trigger. The two girls were confident in their moves, and also believed that under their cooperation, the silver-haired girl would inevitably fall. No matter what, AI Lizi was only an adopted child of the Akkad family and didn't have Akkad's bloodline. Not to mention in Saint Maester theocracy, even in Akkad territory, she was unknown. Nua Iyer could vaguely sense a threat from her every birthday, but she had never seen her make a move. As for Xiaoluo, she didn't put AI Lizi in her eyes at all. In her eyes, the outcome was already decided. However, the result of the matter was far beyond their expectations. You two, how long do you want to hinder me and my elder brother? Under the invasion of the cold, the silver-haired girl roared and her body began to emit light. Her red eyes angrily glared at the two girls who ruined her plan, and she raised her finger and softly chanted, "Curse disintegration." The moment AI Lizi released the curse, an invisible wave gushed out from her body and swept through the room like a gust of wind. The chain that rushed towards her like an arrow disappeared like a painting erased by a painter, and the cold and stiffness in her body also returned to normal as if it didn't exist. Nuo Ayer and Xia Luot, who were at the door, suddenly widened their eyes when the curse was released. It wasn't because their curse was cancelled, but because of the powerful anti-curse skill called Curse Disintegration. As a powerful countermeasure against extraordinary spellcasters, this skill was a must-learn for almost all extraordinary spellcasters. Even the extremist swordsmen who didn't know how to cast other curses would practice it. However, this curse couldn't escape from one principle, and that was that it needed to be suppressed by a level. When facing powerful curses like Nuo Ayer and Xia Luot, it needed to be one level higher to completely dispel it. In other words, it needed to be at source level 3. Source level 3? How is that possible? This little girl, Nuo Ayer and Xia Luot, were shocked by this unbelievable fact. AI Lizzie was 2 years younger than them, and reaching source level 4 at this age was already a terrifying talent. It was impossible for her to reach source level 3. If this was true, it would break the record of the extraordinary humans in history. Wait, she's still using other curses? I see. She's consuming her own life force to increase the power of the curse. Nuo Ayer suddenly understood when she saw the girl's body emitting a faint glow. Curse Overload was a curse that was relatively difficult to learn, and almost no one used it. The principle was very simple, and it was purely to increase the power of the curse. It could even release higher-level curses that didn't match the current level. The side effect was also simple and straightforward, which was to damage one's life force. Harming oneself in order to increase the power of one or two curses was a big taboo in actual combat, because almost no one could guarantee that they could defeat their opponent in a single move. However, this curse was tailor-made for AI Lizzie, and even the difficulty of Shiya's curse was reduced by half for her. This was because people with regenerative bloodlines didn't have to worry about the side effects. AI Lizzie, Akata, had reached source level 4 at such a young age, and it wasn't just because of her talent that Nuo Ayer and the others thought. More importantly, it was because of her bloodline. Ordinary extraordinary humans might only be able to release 10 curses every day before they couldn't bear the side effects, but AI Lizzie could use her bloodline ability to practice dozens, or even hundreds of times. If Xia Luot was a genius, and Nuo Ayer was a genius who worked hard, then AI Lizzie was a genius who worked hard to break through the age gap. There was no doubt that there were many painful experiences in this kind of hard work, but in order to stay by her elder brother's side forever, AI Lizzie endured it all. This was also the reason why Kadia supported her. When he saw the girl repeatedly being injured and healed, but still releasing curses to become stronger, perhaps even a cold-hearted person would be moved. In fact, in Kadia's eyes, the most reliable member of the Akata family wasn't Luoya, nor was it the group of powerful and numerous guards, but AI Lizzie. Kadia believed from the beginning that if Luoya's life was in danger, this girl who usually didn't reveal her abilities would be able to disregard her own life and stand in front of him. Once AI Lizzie broke through to source level 3, she would be able to trade her life for his. Of course, Kadia didn't want this to happen, but this didn't stop him from acknowledging AI Lizzie. Chapter 207. Inside the Hundred Birds Hall, inside the giant skeleton wrapped in red curses, a black-haired youth calmly looked at the three girls silently. Under his gaze, Nuo Ayer, Xia Luot, and AI Lizzie were all stunned. The three girls looked at each other, and the scene fell into silence. Luoya looked at the three girls holding weapons and couldn't help but sigh. To be honest, Luoya still didn't understand the situation. From his perspective, before AI Lizzie finished exhaling in his ear, the door of the room flew open, and then the glass bottle containing the golden soul shattered. The golden liquid directly surrounded him, and after that, he could only rely on his curses to sense the situation. Although he couldn't see or hear, Luoya's curses were still quite good. Of course, another reason was that the three people outside were really lively. Whether it was Nuo Ayer and Xia Luot's angry attacks, or the three people's fighting after that, everything in Luoya's perception was like a giant firework exploding beside him. In a trance, the black-haired youth felt like he was sitting on a mountain of firecrackers in a fireworks factory. He didn't know what to do as he felt the nearby mountains shaking. They're fighting? When this fact was reflected in Luoya's mind, the The black-haired youth's first reaction was to not believe it. How is this possible? Who are the people here? Nuwa, the princess of the Papal Kingdom, the future leader of the Vatican. Xiaoluot, the eldest daughter of Rose, the successor of Serophia. Ai Lizi, the eldest daughter of the Akkad family. No matter how you look at it, this lineup basically represented the top nobles in this world. As the representatives of noble ladies, they should be elegant, virtuous, and courteous. Even if they were angry, they should be careful to show the magnanimity of nobles. How could they fight like shrews? Thinking this, Luoya shook his head. He felt that something might have gone wrong. For example, the golden soul amplified the fluctuations of the curses. But as time passed, when he felt the physical shaking of the earth, the black-haired youth's face changed a little. Forget about the curses. The shaking of the earth couldn't be fake, right? What did the three ladies do to shake the earth? Luoya didn't know the answer to this question, but he knew that this was definitely not something that could be caused by a calm conversation. In a hurry, Luoya decisively decided to make a move. When he circulated his curses, he suddenly found the channel with the Gulan Daer reconnected. Luoya sighed at Ai Lizi's great healing pill, at the same time, had the courage to suppress the signs of a full-scale conflict. Luoya's goal of the Gulan Daer had achieved his goal. Tell me, what do you want to do? In the room, the black-haired youth patted the dust off his body and looked at the three stunned ladies from the huge skeleton. Recalling the scene just now, he couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. The attack of the three ladies just now was no joke. If the Gulan Daer didn't break the collision of the curses, the 100 Birds Hall would have collapsed. More importantly, if there was a big movement, the matter of the princess of the theocracy, Miss Rosetta, and the young lady of the Akkad family fighting would be completely exposed. Having a bad relationship in private and having a falling out in public were two different things, let alone rolling up their sleeves and fighting. No matter what the reason was, this matter would become a stain on the three ladies. Under Luoya's questioning, the three ladies gradually calmed down. They looked at each other and thought of the possible impact of this matter. For a moment, they all fell silent. You, Nuwa Hiskrit, represent the theocracy and the Holy See. You, Xiaoluot Serophia, represent Rosetta and Serophia. You, Ai Lizi Akkad, represent the Akkad family, me, and my father. Do you think the three of you can fight? The black-haired youth pointed at the ladies who made a big mistake one by one and criticized their almost brainless behavior. Under Luoya's angry rebuke, Nuwa looked away, Xiaoluot lowered her head, and Ai Lizi directly wiped her eyes and cried. Because, sob, I finally have time to be intimate with my big brother, but they're bothering me again, sob. Ai Lizi choked out her dissatisfaction. Her pitiful look made Luoya's heart ache. He wanted to rush over and hug her immediately, but now that all three of them were present, Luoya could only suppress his thoughts. He thought for a moment, sighed, and softened his tone a little. No matter what the reason is, the relationship between the three of you shouldn't be like this. Fighting is too much, not to mention a fight with such a big commotion. The high-level extraordinary Rosetta must have sensed your fight just now. My father and the others will probably rush over soon. What do you plan to say? Luoya's question was like a sharp knife, stabbing into the hearts of the three impulsive ladies. Not to mention Xiaoluot and Ai Lizi, whose fathers were about to arrive. Even Nuwa face turned a little pale. This, if you say it's a fight, it doesn't seem right. I'm afraid my father and the others won't believe it. Nonsense. The three of you are fighting in front of my sickbed? It would be strange if they would believe it. Luoya complained in his heart. He turned to look at the messy surroundings and the servants and guards who rushed over to look at them from the door. Luoya didn't want too many witnesses, so he decisively dispersed the crowd. Then, he looked at the three girls and smiled bitterly. He felt a headache coming on. Before their parents arrived, Luoya said that he would help the three girls no matter what. Otherwise, if it really caused a conflict between the higher-ups, Luoya wouldn't be able to absolve himself from the blame. Moreover, the great impact on the future would cause Luoya's originally useless plot prediction to completely collapse. Gulan Daer, it seems that I can only let you be the scapegoat. Use my power to cover the traces of the cursed power. After thinking for a long time, Luo Ya apologetically apologized to the giant skeleton. Gulan Daer readily agreed. A gust of red wind blew by, and everything in the room began to become undead. This should be enough, right? Luo Ya looked around and nodded as he muttered to himself. Just as he was about to thank Gulan Daer, he suddenly felt something sweet in his throat. The next second, he directly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 208. In the steamy bathroom, Luo Ya Akat leaned against the edge of the pool, looking up at the gorgeous chandelier above his head in a daze. After a long time, the black-haired youth exhaled and looked down helplessly. Okay, my little brother hasn't rested yet. I'll continue to soak. Sigh. With a helpless sigh, Luo Ya scooped up a handful of cold water and washed his face, hoping to cool down his overheated brain. But the truth was that it didn't have much effect. Actually, Roha couldn't feel much of the outside world's temperature right now. The excessive amount of life energy was running all over his body, making him feel as uncomfortable as if he ate 200 kidneys and drank 100 pounds of ginseng wine. Looking at his pale pink body that was like a freshly cooked crab, Luo Ya couldn't help but recall the chaos an hour ago. An hour ago, in order to get rid of the side effects of his life exhaustion, Luo Ya and AI Lizzie performed a special treatment. According to Master Andrew's recommendation, they used the body fluid method, but strangely, during the treatment process, the body fluid method that should have been clearly controllable went wrong, causing a serious excess of life energy. Originally, Luo Ya wanted to collect AI Lizzie's tears, but because of her firm opposition, the two changed to a rather ambiguous method of feeding each other wine. But this method inexplicably overdosed. Until now, Luo Ya still didn't understand why a few mouthfuls of wine with a trace of saliva could make him like this. After a long time, he could only attribute it to AI Lizzie's life energy and the Pamela wine having an unknown reaction that strengthened the effect. But just like how most people didn't care about the cause of the incident, when the door was blown open, Nua Iyer and Xia Luo didn't care about how Luo Ya's situation became like this. They only cared about one thing, and that was AI Lizzie riding on top of him. The two of them looked like they were in a delirious state. Although he inexplicably felt that the girls didn't want him to be too sober after seeing his appearance, and they didn't seem too happy when the servants gave him an ice pack at that time, he didn't have time to think about why, because there were more troublesome things waiting for him. More than 10 minutes after the three girls started fighting, Kadia and Bruce came together, followed by Andrew and a group of important figures. The two fathers looked at the doors stuck in the roof, and then looked at the traces of the Gulan Daer's broken roof above Luo Ya. They couldn't help but look at each other. Obviously, Luo Ya's intervention had an effect. The appearance of the Gulan Daer had disrupted the situation, and the group of high-level extraordinaires couldn't quite understand what was going on. While everyone was confused, Luo Ya decisively took the initiative to take the blame. Father, Uncle Bruce, after I recovered from my injuries, I had too much vitality, and I didn't control my curse power well, so I went berserk. Fortunately, AI Lizzie, Nua Iyer, and Xia Luo were there to stop me. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The black-haired young man said so with an apologetic expression, which stunned Kadia and Bruce. The two fathers looked at each other, then looked at the three girls who had stiff expressions on their faces with a strange expression. They had almost guessed the truth without saying a word. All right, the child has really grown up. She even knows how to steal other people's men. Such thoughts surged in their minds, and the fathers sighed with emotion. Bruce looked at Luo Ya, who had an apologetic smile on his face, and immediately understood the black-haired young man's intention. Luo Ya was trying to find a way out for the relationship between the three parties. For this reason, he even destroyed the scene and took the blame himself. It had to be said that it was really rare for someone at his age to be so considerate. After understanding Luo Ya's painstaking efforts, Bruce naturally wouldn't pursue the matter and fully cooperated with him. I see. This is really an unfortunate accident, but fortunately, it's more daunting than dangerous. With this sentence as the beginning, the president directly classified this incident as an accident. In the face of Luo Ya's self-blame, Bruce enthusiastically stepped forward, held his hand, and comforted him with a smile. What kind of person was Luoya? At least at this stage, he was a patient. He was a patient, after all. No matter what happened to a patient, it wasn't his own subjective behavior, so he shouldn't be blamed. Wasn't it just a broken roof? How could this be called an accident? Bruce was indeed worthy of being the head of a business family. His speech was very cordial and enthusiastic. Whether it was Kadia or Luoya, both of them felt very comfortable listening to it. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room became harmonious, and the group of strong people who came along with him also went along with the flow. After a show of mutual understanding and harmony, Luoya, who couldn't support his life energy after completing the mission, was sent to the bathroom to soak in a cold bath. After completing the mission and settling the matter, Luoya was slightly sober under physical therapy. Now, it was time for Luoya to consider some things. Gulandair, are you there? I'm here. A dull and somewhat hoarse male voice echoed in his ears. The phantom of a huge skeleton formed an image with curse power as a pin. Luoya looked at the faint phantom in the air and heaved a sigh of relief. He opened his mouth and asked the question that had been in his heart for a long time. Previously, I had a dream. The black-haired young man soaked in cold water and told the huge skeleton about the situation of that night. Gulandair listened to Luoya's narration without any fluctuation in his emotions. However, when Luoya said that he was watched by a pair of eyes, the light spots in the huge skeleton's eye sockets couldn't help but shrink. It's a little troublesome. When Gulandair finished listening to Luoya's words and gave such an evaluation, the black-haired young man couldn't help but have a serious expression. Until now, he had been together with Gulandair for several years, but this was the first time Luoya heard such words from his mouth. Generally speaking, when Luoya asked a question, he would give the word small, just like when he was a giant overlooking the world. These were all small questions, but this time it was troublesome. Is the owner of that pair of eyes very strong? I'm not sure. When you were dreaming, the passage was broken, and I couldn't sense anything. However, the ability you absorbed did come from a powerful monster. If this monster is only the servant of the Mother Goddess, then her strength is probably far beyond imagination. Gulandair, have you not heard of the Mother Goddess in your time? Maybe I have heard of it, maybe I haven't. It's probably because my head is empty. In the long years, I have forgotten too many things. I can't remember a lot of things when I was alive. Gulandair hesitated for a long time and said, It seems that I have to find some people for you. Chapter 209. For a long time, whenever Luoya and the Gulandair talked about the strength, source substance, the giant skeleton didn't seem to care. After all, in the eyes of the Gulandair, who ruled the land in ancient times, anyone who didn't reach source rank 3 was just a small fry. It was a level that didn't need to be looked at. Of course, Luoya was an exception. Crown, origin substance. This was without a doubt a very special origin substance. Although it had the basic functions of an origin substance, relying on the bloodline, it could unleash unimaginable power. Under extreme circumstances, the owner of this origin substance could rely on the strength of a contestant to defeat opponents several levels higher. Of course, it wasn't a good thing to defeat opponents who were stronger than him. The strength of a contractor would often cause excessive corrosion to the owner of the crown, which would lead to troublesome side effects. But it had to be said that no matter the level of the owner of the crown, source substance, or its bloodline, it would be a major unstable factor. As long as one was willing to sacrifice himself, even the emperor would be dragged down. You didn't have so many troubles in the past. I could deal with those rats in the dark, but the situation might change in the future. Sometimes, having more people is a powerful advantage. The Gulandair rarely emphasized the theory of numbers to Luoya, which made the black-haired boy stunned. Giants were famous for their outstanding individual combat strength. They rarely fought in groups. He didn't expect that the Gulandair would ask him to expand his combat strength. A person's energy is limited, no matter how strong they are. I understand this principle, but speaking of manpower, Akat Hill should have a lot of people, right? Luoya thought as he recalled the number of soldiers that were twice the number of ordinary marquis families. The Akot family might not be good at other things, but at least they were outstanding in terms of military strength. However, the Gulandair shook his head at Luoya's words. It's not that kind of a sea of people. What I mean is to find some people who can fight. Fight. This description was very simple. It was very suitable for the Gulandair's style. But the problem was, what did this big brother mean by fight? Luoya was very clear. Source rank 3? It's better if it's higher. Ah, this. The black-haired youth looked at the big skeleton with a forced expression. Naturally, the Akot clan had level 3 source-grade experts, but these people were Kadia's right-hand men. They had been on the front lines for many years and held important positions. Although Luoya was the only son of the Akot clan, it was impossible for these people to follow behind him all the time. It would be a waste. Experts like Gulacy, who stayed close to Xiaoluo, were few and far between. Furthermore, the Sorofia family had always felt that Gulacy was overqualified. It was just that she was unwilling to do anything else. In the end, level 3 source-grade experts were not cabbages that could be found anywhere. They were recruited by various countries over the years, and the supply could not meet the demand. The level 3 source-grade experts of the 3 major origin substances had long been snatched away. The experts of the origin substances had their own families. Unless they were completely subdued by the Akot clan, no one would give up their family to protect Luoya. According to the requirements of the Gulandair, Luoya found that only the experts of the pagans could be recruited. Of course, he was not the only one who found out. In fact, the kings of small countries with weak competitiveness had also found out long ago. However, very few of them were recruited. After all, considering the danger of these people, they were ticking time bombs of level 3 source grade. Normal people would not be able to handle it. Although others might not be able to handle it, Luoya might not be able to do so. This was because he had already grasped the highest control of 2 pathways, the Gulandair and Paitila, as the supreme existences of the ancient times, had reached the limit of their own origin substances. The pagans in this world who used their origin substances could be said to be under their control. Luoya was not clear about the Paitila's origin substance, but the Gulandair's Luoya was often used. So are there many people who still use the power origin substance? Not too many. The giant's origin substances are not suitable for you. That was true. Looking at the giant's bodies, the power origin substance was probably one of the cruder origin substances. There were probably not many suitable for the human race. Luoya thought so inside. He had to dispel the thought in his heart until the Gulandair continued. There are probably only 2 people who can be bribed. Is that so? That's 2. HM? Big brother, what did you say? The black-haired young man sitting in the cold pool raised his head and stared at the Gulandair's skull for a while. The giant skeleton was silent for a while under his gaze and asked, Source level 3, do you need it? Yes. Call them. Call as many as you can. Luoya clenched his fist and gave an answer with excitement. The 2 source level 3 pagans led the pagans group. This was the highest organization among the pagans' largest mercenary group. With the stability of the Gulandair's control, they did not have to worry about falling into depravity. They were simply the best foreign aid. Thinking of this, Luoya was excited, but at the same time, he was a little worried. This deal was almost beneficial to Luoya, but what about these pagans who used the power origin substance? Although the pagans generally did not have a good life in this world, they could still make a living in some small countries that valued strength more. With the strength of source level 3, it was possible to be a general. If Luoya wanted to buy them, the Akot family could also offer a price, but would they be willing to come? For this question, the Gulandair gave his own answer. Although the giant skeleton didn't know whether these people were living well or not, as a source substance user, the Gulandair could not only have a bad influence on them, but it could also have a good effect. For example, he could bless these downstream units. After all, In this special period, slowing down his progress was the last thing that Luoya wanted. The system refreshed once a month, and there might not be any potions next time. Luoya really couldn't afford to waste time. However, after a short moment of excitement, a question began to appear in his mind. Is this item okay? How useful is it? After thinking carefully for a long time, Luoya decided to make a double insurance. Although the Bell of Protection was expensive, it was currently on sale, so he could still afford it. For his own safety, Luoya was very willing to spend points. Moreover, this could also be used as an experiment by Luoya to introduce abstract items. Other than that, the other insurance was the ordinary level-up potion. Level-up potions had existed since ancient times. Now, she also had them. Luoya was currently in the city with the most variety of materials in the continent. Naturally, he wanted to find a better one for himself. However, he had to admit that the level of potions in this era was terrible. No matter how good the potion was, its use would be limited. Luoya still didn't know whether 1 plus 1 was greater than or equal to 2, but this was already his best plan at this stage. After planning everything, Luoya came out of the bath and went ashore. He reported his needs through the servants. Of course, Luoya said that he was going to buy it. The Akot family was now considered a wealthy aristocrat, so a level-up potion wouldn't be free. After the riot was classified as an accident, both Xiaoluot and Ai Lizi were taken away by their fathers. Although Kadia and Brosnan had to maintain a good atmosphere in public, it didn't mean that the two girls' mistakes were forgotten. Nuwa Iyer didn't have any parents, so she escaped the disaster. However, after this incident, she obediently went back home. At least for today, Luoya's side was peaceful. After Luoya took the initiative to take the blame, Brosnan had a more comprehensive understanding of his daughter's fiancé. Perhaps because of this, when the sound of a carriage sounded in the evening, the servants came with an exquisite box. They didn't mention the price at all until Luoya asked about the exquisite carved glass vase. Young Master Luoya, you are a distinguished guest of the Sorofia family. During your stay in the 100 Birds Hall, we will take care of all your needs. This is our honor, so please don't mind. After saying so, the servant smiled and left, making Luoya smile helplessly. After thinking for a while, the black-haired young man nodded slightly. As the saying goes, it would be impolite to refuse. Since the Sorofia family was so enthusiastic, it would be strange for him to refuse. After thinking it through, Luoya looked at the crystal-clear liquid in the container carefully. Should I say that expensive things always have a better appearance? The potion given by the Sorofia family was obviously a high-grade product. It was orange in color and somewhat resembled wine. The smell wasn't pungent, and compared to the Biuelo series, it was much better in appearance. However, the appearance of a potion wasn't the most important thing. Luoya thought so and shook his head. He opened the system and looked at the Bell of Protection. After hesitating for a while, he finally clenched his teeth and chose to buy it. After a flash of light, the item that cost 250,000 points of Luoya finally appeared. However, what the black-haired young man didn't expect was that this item that sounded very big and cost a lot of points was actually not that big. In fact, it was a little small. It was a small black pocket-sized bell. He didn't know what material it was made of, but its shape was very traditional and even a little ordinary. It was only as tall as Luoya's calf and could be held with one hand. If one didn't pay attention, one would think that it was a big bell. However, the patterns on it were very complicated. Looking at the simple and mysterious little bell, Luoya felt a little more at ease. He placed the two items on the table and looked out of the window. Now that the life exhaustion and the ice status had been removed, only the undying status was still affecting him. Then, there was only one thing left to do. Let's have dinner together after a long time, with Miss Angel. Chapter 212. While Luoya was enduring Nuwa Iyer's stormy attacks on the balcony at the top of the pavilion of Celta, Xiaoluo Tsurophia was facing a serious challenge on another battlefield. This evening, a banquet was also held at the Carlos Hall in the second manor of Tsurophia. However, unlike the banquet where Nuaire and Luoya supported each other, Tsurophia's banquet was quite serious and unusually polite. There was only one person invited to this banquet, and that was the head of the Akkad family, Kadia Akkad. As for the invitee, it was Bruce Tsurophia. However, this was not a secret meeting between the two of them, but a third person. At the dining table, the reddish-brown-haired girl was eating her meal with proper etiquette. Beside her ears were the occasional chatter of the two family heads. From yesterday's exchange of pleasantries until now, Bruce and Kadia were already quite familiar with each other, which was why their conversations were much more relaxed. Marquis Kadia, the weather on your side this year seems to be better than in the past. Indeed, this winter is not as cold as in the past, but there is still a lot of snow. The weather on Rose's side is still stable. I think this year's grain production should be good. Haha, indeed. Our Ministry of Agriculture also expects this year to be a bumper harvest. Bruce took a sip of wine and said so with a smile. He looked to the side and glanced at Xiaoluo, who was obviously more nervous than usual. He sighed in his heart. Now that the banquet had reached the dessert segment, the three people at the dining table were basically chatting. After a long period of foreshadowing and getting closer to each other, Bruce began to work. Marquis Kadia, I'm very sorry about this incident. Xiaoluo was too concerned about Luoya, so she did this on impulse. Haha, Mr. Bruce, you don't have to apologize. Our family's AI Lizzie has always been infatuated with Luoya, which led to this ridiculous incident. We have to apologize to the host, Rose. Marquis Kadia is too polite. This time, the successful treatment of Luoya back to Rose is all thanks to Miss AI Lizzie. Luoya and Xiaoluo found many ancient technologies of the Kingdom of Sophia in the ruins together. They are our benefactors. His recovery is our most sincere wish. The two fathers laughed back and forth, which made Xiaoluo's face even paler. Marquis Kadia's undisguised support for his adopted daughter could be said to be clear and easy to understand. Most importantly, Xiaoluo didn't hear anything about the marriage contract from him. The marriage contract between the two families was now in name only due to Nuaire's intervention. After this incident, although Xiaoluo seemed to still have a name, in fact, it was a loss because without the marriage contract, the other two had the approval of Luoya's father, Kadia. They were far superior to her. There was no doubt that this was an unfair competition. Although Luoya was a person who didn't pay much attention to these things, the boy paid more attention to the most direct feelings when getting along with people. However, falling in love and getting married were two different things. Once it came to marriage, Kadia was a mountain that couldn't be bypassed. After understanding this, Xiaoluo naturally didn't dare to act rashly. She decisively looked for Bruce, hoping to solve this matter. But so far, Kadia's attitude still hadn't changed. This time, Luoya helped our Tsurophia family find important historical relics, many of which we have searched for hundreds of years without success. I think this means that the friendship between our two families has reached a fateful moment, and we can go further. Ha ha ha, Mr. Bruce, you flatter me. Luoya was just following the guidance of the bloodline. It was unexpected that she could help find Tsurophia family's target curse vessel. As for the further cooperation between our two families, I agree. The economic development of Akkad Hill is inseparable from Luoya's assistance and support. Under Kadia's modest and polite change of topic, Bruce smiled on the surface, but he was helpless in his heart. On the other side, Xiaoluo was completely at a loss. To this day, Xiaoluo didn't understand why Kadia was so opposed to her contacting Luoya. As the eldest daughter of the Tsurophia family, Xiaoluo ruled a region with her extraordinary talent when she was 9 years old. Even the leaders of the Rosetta Chamber of Commerce respected her from the bottom of their hearts. Whether it was talent, status, or ability, Xiaoluo was almost impeccable. However, these seemed to be ineffective in front of Kadia. Where am I lacking? Why is Luoya's father so annoying? Is it because I forcibly brought back Luoya? No, that's not right. Kadia's interference was already there before that. Then why? The girl clenched her fists and bit her lips. There were countless questions in her heart. However, In the face of her lover's parents, Xiaoluo didn't dare to question them at all. She was so nervous that she didn't even dare to speak. That's right, Charlotte, who had never had stage fright before, was now scared. She felt that this was the first time she had fought in a situation where she didn't have any information to support her and didn't understand her opponent's needs. If she were to lose, she might lose the love that she treasured. This price was too great, so great that she couldn't bear it. Well, it's getting late, Mr. Bruce, Miss Xiaoluo. It's almost time for me to leave. After a flawless chat, Kadia politely said goodbye with a smile on her face. Bruce glanced sideways at Xiaoluo, who hadn't spoken much all this time, and stiffened when she heard Kadia say goodbye. He knew that tonight's banquet was probably in vain. What a pity. This should have been the best opportunity, but Kadia's attitude was very firm. His daughter's marriage was probably. The brown-haired, middle-aged man thought about the Akhat family's attitude all this time and felt pessimistic. Xiaoluo's abnormal performance tonight made him very anxious. There was no doubt that his daughter had fallen deeply in love, and there was a problem with her mentality. It was precisely because of this that she appeared to be timid in front of Luo Ya's father. However, this actually made her look bad. Showing her true self and showing her outstanding side to conquer the other party's parents was what Xiaoluo should do now. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Bruce stood up and sent Kadia off. On the other side, the brown-haired girl also stood up stiffly. Xiaoluo felt that her brain was numb. She also knew that today's private meeting was the best opportunity, but her performance was far worse than she imagined. Looking at Kadia's back as she stood up and left, Xiaoluo suddenly had a feeling. If she let her leave like this, Kadia's impression of her would be completely formed. She had to do something, but what could she do now? Her mind was blank, and her breathing was difficult to control. The high tension made it difficult for Xiaoluo to move. The girl lowered her head and desperately thought of a solution. Suddenly, she recalled the moment when she pulled the trigger and shot Luo Ya's body under the cover of the terrifying black monster. At that moment, Xiaoluo's love transcended life and death and defeated the most fundamental fear of mankind. Compared to that, what was the current situation? Even a monster like Mr. Darkness couldn't cut off her love for Luo Ya. Was she going to ruin her feelings in this peaceful time? Chapter 213. Xiaoluo had an epiphany the moment she rushed out. What could move Kadia? Even someone as intelligent as her had never thought of this question. For Kadia, a powerful minister of the theocracy, one of the 5 great nobles, and the lord of a large number of territories, there was almost nothing in the world that could change his mind. But if he were to disregard all this, as a father of a single-parent family and a man who had been widowed for many years, there was one thing that could move him. That was true love. Kadia was a rare person among the nobles who cared about feelings, especially when it came to the relationship between a man and a woman. Kadia was very different from other nobles who traded marriages. Because of this, he did not think highly of Xiaoluo's marriage from the very beginning. No matter how it was covered up, this was still a transaction between 2 families. But what if Xiaoluo could show true love that far surpassed this transaction and that Kadia appreciated? The girl was unsure of the answer to this question, but she was willing to take a gamble and use her truest feelings as a weapon to attack. I love Luo Ya. Please don't stand in the way of our love. This is the only request I have in my life. The moment the girl bent down, both Bruce and Kadia in the room were stunned. The sound of the clock ticking echoed in the luxuriously decorated room like never before. Kadia frowned after a few seconds. Miss Xiaoluo, I think you might have some misunderstandings. Please get up, Uncle Kadia. You might know that when I first met Luo Ya, I was misunderstood and induced. Before the Lord Marquis could finish his excuses, the reddish-brown-haired girl retorted with this almost concrete inducement incident. Kadia's expression changed the moment she said that and began to turn a little ugly. Mentioning the induced incident in front of his face would undoubtedly make him feel like he was holding her accountable. As the mastermind behind this incident, Kadia naturally felt somewhat embarrassed after hearing this. Xiaoluo was aware of this situation, but her next words stunned the Marquis. Uncle, I have no opinion about that incident because it wasn't just the induced people. At that time, I also thought that my marriage with Luoya was inappropriate. As she said this, Xia Luo raised her head and looked straight into Ka Dia's eyes with her emerald eyes. 100-year marriage contract. Although it sounds historical, marriage itself shouldn't be decided by the past. Marriage represents the future. It's the beginning of one person choosing another person to support each other and fight against all external factors in the future. It's beautiful and sacred, but it shouldn't be planned. That is indeed the case. Listening to Xia Luo's understanding of marriage, Ka Dia, who was free to love, could not help but nod with a lot of emotions. Xia Luo looked at the man who was willing to listen to her and felt emotional. She recalled the situation with Luoya at that time and continued. So, when I met Luoya, there were many misunderstandings between us. I'm afraid you didn't know that our relationship started from mutual disgust, but just like my divination, love is as unpredictable as fate. When we were exploring the legacy of the Sophia dynasty, our lives were in danger several times. In that special environment, we fought together and did our best to save each other. Luoya used his own body to block an attack for me, and I once gave him the hope of survival. Our love was born in such an environment. Its birth was accompanied by the most difficult test, but in the end, our love won. Uncle Ka Dia, after going through all this, do you think I can still let go? Xia Luo asked in a choked voice. The Marquis, who heard Xia Luo and Luoya's story for the first time, could not help but widen his eyes slightly. For a moment, he did not know how to answer. Seeing this, the girl did not press him and only silently lowered her head again. Uncle, I know I came late. I'm not as good as Princess Nuaire to provide him with protection. I don't have the deep accumulation of experience with him like Miss A.I. Lizzie, but I will never lose to anyone when it comes to love Luoya. Please give me a chance, I beg of you. I beg of you. The reddish-brown-haired girl's face was covered in tears halfway through her words. Her tears fell drop by drop onto the carpet. Seeing this, Ka Dia was finally completely speechless. Xia Luo's true feelings undoubtedly brought a huge impact to Ka Dia. At the same time, it also made him feel nostalgic. In a trance, the Marquis seemed to see the figure of his deceased wife, as well as the nobles who opposed his marriage when he was young. But what he did not expect was that many years later, he would actually stand in the same position. An unprecedented emotion rose in the man's heart. He looked at the girl in front of him, and his gaze gradually softened. Sigh, I'm old. The black-haired, middle-aged man sighed and said to the crying Xia Luo, Child, get up. I agree to your request. Uncle Ka Dia, you mean, in the future, I won't object to the matter between you and Luoya, but at the same time, I won't agree to it, Ka Dia said and sighed silently. Nuaire and A.I. Lizzie were first, and Ka Dia had already expressed his support, so this was the biggest concession he could make. I can't control Luoya's thoughts. Everything depends on you. Yes, I understand. Thank you. Hearing Ka Dia's acknowledgement to a certain extent, Xia Luo's heart relaxed, and her tears flowed even more uncontrollably. Chapter 2:14. The system gave Roha a clock. It seems like it can be said that, tasting the sweet potion in his mouth, Roha sighed and touched the bell on the table. He couldn't help but have a question in his mind. How do I use this thing? Generally speaking, the bell needed to be struck. But when Luoya thought about striking the bell while breaking through, he had an inexplicable feeling of a senior monk passing away. Luoya thought about it and didn't ask the maids for help. Instead, he tried using the spell. No matter what, it was still a high-level item. Luoya felt that it shouldn't be activated by human power, and it turned out that he was right. The moment the curse power poured into the small black bell, the simple black bell seemed to have come back to life from the dust of ancient times. The bell vibrated and buzzed, and at the same time, many incomprehensible runes began to squirm, and the next moment, they suddenly exploded. After a light ring, the runes spread out and shot into the air. The mysterious runes formed a unique domain that enveloped Luoya. In a trance, The young man seemed to hear the sweet sound of a bell from afar, but when he looked carefully, the black bell on the table didn't move at all. Is this something like a barrier? Luoya looked around and nodded. At the same time, a warm feeling spread through Luoya's body. A faint sleepiness began to spread in the young man's mind. Listening to the sound of the bell, Luoya calmed down and silently activated the spell. The room fell into silence. The next morning, a carriage arrived at the wide courtyard of the 100 Birds Hall. It was a luxurious black carriage with the symbol of the Eye of Candlelight. The guard who came to inquire saw the family emblem and immediately recognized that it was the private carriage of the Akot family. He greeted them with a smile and let them in. Everyone in the 100 Birds Hall, from the butler to the ordinary guards, knew about the Akot family situation. To describe the current situation, the 100 Birds Hall could be said to be hiding a mistress in a golden house. Even though this Jiao was a man. And after understanding the thoughts of the master of the mansion, their young mistress, the servants in the mansion naturally felt friendlier towards the Akot family, who were allies to begin with. Stepping down from the carriage, Count Kadia nodded at the servants who greeted him with a smile and was led to the guest room. It had been a few days since he came to Rose. The festive atmosphere had subsided. He had also met privately several times. Now that many things were done, it was time for Kadia to take a good look at his son who was kidnapped by a beautiful girl. However, to his surprise, Luoya was very different from the last time. He was full of energy. The Marquis, who carefully observed for a moment, couldn't help but be surprised. Did you break through? Count Kadia's powerful perception caught the spell leaking from Luoya's body. He couldn't help but ask in surprise. Under the inquiry of his father, Luoya also gave an honest answer. The middle-aged man who learned that his son had reached source level 4 couldn't help but be overjoyed. I didn't expect it. I really didn't expect it. When you were young, your extraordinary talent was very poor. I thought it would be difficult for you to achieve anything in this life. Who would have thought that you would awaken the family bloodline? Kadia looked at Luoya and sighed. Reaching source level 4 was not a small matter. It must be known that in the current Shiya, there were at least hundreds of noble children. Although most of them were only in name, the average strength of this group was indeed higher than ordinary people and even higher than the lower nobles. Luoya was 13 years old this year and would be an adult next year. At that time, studying in the country of scholars would be an essential step. It was a gathering of the young elites of the human world that was far from comparable to so far. There, he would meet a large number of people of the same age. At this age of youth, strength was often the most important thing. Being able to reach source level 5 was basically the first-class standard of this age. It was an elite who had the right to speak and was envied. But even so, it was far from unique. The world was very big. The consequences of looking down on the heroes of the world was most likely to be slapped in the face. However, reaching source level 4 was different. Source level 4 was a threshold. It was the threshold that attracted the most attention of the peerless geniuses. Whether it was Nuo Iyer, Ai Lizi, or Xiaoluot, they were all at the top of the pyramid of this era. Their talents and abnormalities could be seen at a glance. However, Luoya was not. In Kadia's eyes, even if Luoya awakened his bloodline, it would be extremely difficult for him to reach source level 4. However, this inherent concept was now broken by Luoya's own efforts. This made Kadia happy and gratified. On the other side, the black-haired boy did not have such a feeling. In fact, Luoya felt that his current condition was not good. After experimenting with Shiya's highest-level promotion assistance potion, Luoya deeply understood that the Burrow series was really top-notch. Although it did not look gorgeous and often had strange side effects, in terms of effects, the Burrow series could be said to be very good. Whether it was the golden partner or the fake wine, Luoya would not be able to get up after drinking it. However, after he recovered, he would immediately stabilize his breakthrough. However, this time, Shiya's promotion assistance potion was not the same. The assistance potion was really an assistance potion. Unlike the Burrow series, Luoya had to control and guide the curse power to a certain extent by himself. He struggled for an entire night before he succeeded, and this was still within the barrier of the Bell of Protection. It had to be said that this time, Luo Ya's caution had paid off. The Bell of Protection that he gritted his teeth and bought was very useful. In the high-pressure environment of the promotion period, encountering setbacks was very likely to double the pressure and make one go astray. However, within the barrier of the bell's sound, all these worries and tension seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Something similar to a blessing maintained the peace of his heart. It could be said that half of the reason why Luoya took an entire night to succeed was because of the Bell of Protection. After experiencing it once, Luoya also understood that the effect was the same within the barrier. In other words, several people could use the Bell of Protection at the same time. Luoya was very satisfied with this. After all, who did not like to exercise with more people? The boy rejoiced. After seeing Luoya's strength, Kadia also felt a lot more at ease. He waved at Luoya and told him the purpose of his visit this time. Luoya, I want to talk to you about your marriage. Chapter 215. Once upon a time, Kadia felt that his family's future goal was very clear, and that was to have a house full of children and grandchildren. The Akkad family was a family with a rare bloodline. In the past 1,000 years, the members of the family rarely prospered. Usually, only one person would carry on the family line, which was quite rare among the nobles. Kadia's father, Bran, had once told him about the characteristics of the Akkad family. They were good at fighting, but not good at fighting in groups, because the Akkad family didn't have groups. They could only fight in groups alone. When Bran said this, he had a helpless expression on his face. He looked at Kadia with high hopes, but unfortunately, Kadia was defeated in the end. According to the family tradition, Kadia gave birth to an only child. After discovering that Luoya's talent was mediocre when he was young, Kadia's thoughts became much clearer. Being an ordinary person wasn't a bad thing for the Akkad family to some extent. After all, the most important task in the life of an ordinary noble was to give birth. Without extraordinary powers, they wouldn't have too many duties and responsibilities. They would be fine if they stayed in the territory and didn't wander around. So naturally, they would have more opportunities to reproduce. In fact, in the Akkad family's 1,000 years of history, the heads of the Akkad family who prospered were always mediocre in terms of extraordinary power. One reason was that there were many births, and the other reason was that there were many receptacles. If they weren't very capable, they would usually marry the daughter of a count who was of equal status. Generally speaking, the first wife of such a status wouldn't be able to stop the Marquis from taking in concubines. Therefore, the heads of the Akkad family during these times were rare to have many wives and concubines, and many children and grandchildren. Of course, after a few generations, they would usually fall into a population crisis. The wives would return to the powerful family, and the husband and wife would both be extraordinary, so their fertility rate was basically the lowest among all couples. Kadia was familiar with the family's history, so he was very clear about the morality of the ancestors in this aspect. But it had to be said that even though Kadia had traveled extensively, he still panicked and had a headache when he saw the girls around Luoya every day. The princess of the Saint Maester theocracy, the successor to the president of the Rose Business Union, and the eldest daughter of the Akkad family. When these few people gathered together, it would easily become a regional or even international news. Perhaps it was due to the short lifespan of the Akkad families awakened, but no matter if it was Nua Iyer, Ai Lizi, or Xia Luot, they all had a special concern for Luoya, and their desire to protect her was extremely high. Under the driving force of love, the strength of these girls soared like a rocket. In the past, it would be considered good to find one Nua Iyer in the entire human world. But now, there were 3 of them. Moreover, these 3 girls obviously had no intention of giving up. 2 days ago, they even fought over Luoya. If he really only chose one in the future, would the other 2 be willing to let it go? For example, Ai Lizi, in order to increase her strength, she practiced almost masochistically. Her lifelong wish was to marry Luoya and have a baby with him. When the time came, if Luoya chose someone else, would she be able to give her blessings as a sister? This kind of rejection of the meaning of life The blow of being abandoned, Kadia felt that it was normal for love to turn into hate. The murder of love was like a knife, floating in Kadia's heart every day. He felt that he had to remind Luoya. Luoya, do you still remember what I told you to find more women? Yes, I remember. I take back those words. From now on, you have to remember one thing. Never, never provoke girls again. After thinking for a long time, the Marquis looked at the youth in front of him and said this sincerely. Hearing this, Luoya's face turned blank. The youth blinked. He didn't understand why his father, who was happy that he had advanced to level 4 of source rank, would suddenly mention this. However, with this request, it wasn't a big deal. As expected, his father, who had yet to remarry, still advocated monogamy. Luoya looked at the single man in front of him and sighed in his heart. Kadia's deep feelings were rarely seen in noble families. This was something that Luoya deeply felt. From this point of view, Luoya wasn't surprised that Kadia had changed his mind. Father, don't worry. I understand. Yes, it's good that you understand. I was afraid that you would be impulsive. I will learn from you and only marry one. Yes, that's HM? Hearing Luoya's reply, the Marquis' eyes widened. After a long time, he pointed at the youth and trembled in anger, unable to speak. You still understand? What the hell do you understand? Kadia complained in his heart. On the other side, the black-haired youth looked at his agitated father and nodded with a smile. As expected, I guess correctly. Sigh. Look at how happy my father is. He's trembling in excitement. Luoya felt good about having a filial son. Kadia became even angrier when he saw this. He didn't dare to say anything more and could only clear up the misunderstanding between Luoya and himself. What I meant was that you shouldn't learn from me. What's wrong with marrying more? It's good to marry more. What I really meant was that in less than a year's time, you will be going to the academy. At that time, there will be more and more young people, and there will be more temptations. You must control yourself. Those who get close to you might not necessarily be good to you. They might be opportunists who covet our family. Kadia's words were quite serious. In fact, he had encountered such situations when he was young. He had even heard of successful cases of scheming women. If Luoya couldn't resist the temptation and married such a woman, then the Akhat family would probably explode in a physical sense. Ai Lizzie didn't need to be mentioned. Luochet was right next to her, and the journey to the holy capital was about the same. He would probably be robbed and killed before he could even enter the Akhat family. Kadia's mind was filled with scenes of chaos and war. Luoya was stunned for a moment before he held his chin and fell into deep thought. Indeed, although the girls that Luoya met before this were extremely intelligent, they were all very pure. Moreover, their family backgrounds were the best in the Shia family. There was no reason for them to covet the Akhat family. However, after entering the academy, things would be different. Sometimes, green tea girls didn't care about age. It was even an instinct. Luoya didn't have much experience in the field of relationships. Chapter 216. Sharon Forest. This was a place Luoya was both familiar and unfamiliar with. Ever since he was a child, Luoya had heard of a terrifying forest in the south called Sharon Forest. There were countless monsters and cruel werewolves hidden within. If one didn't obey, they would be captured by the werewolves of Sharon Forest. That's right, this was a popular story in the Akate territory, or rather, in the entire southern part of the Saint Mestre Empire. In this story, werewolves were murderers who ran around everywhere, hiding in the dark corners, waiting to catch students. Children who heard this story for the first time would be scared to the point of crying. Of course, after Luoya recalled the memories of his past life, this kind of story no longer scared him. After growing up and doing some research, Luoya discovered that there were many strange and bizarre stories in Sharon Forest. There were several records of legends written based on these rumors in the Akhat family. Under the influence of such large-scale rumors, Sharon Forest gradually became a synonym for terror among the people of various countries. It became a place where people rarely went. Those who went there were mostly explorers, and some of them had some mental issues. After all, anyone with a normal brain would go to ruins where there was a chance of getting rich overnight, and not go to the forest to call the werewolves brothers. Luoya actually knew the reason why these people were attracted. It was one of the legends that said that there was a huge secret hidden in the depths of Sharon Forest. In the past, Luoya didn't care about it, but after hearing Isha Bela's words, Luoya felt that it might have something to do with the activities of the Sage of Dusk. Tyrants, this was an ancient race that was almost extinct. Their lifespan was generally very long, and as long as they had the right conditions, it wouldn't be a problem for them to live for thousands of years. At least in the legends, these Tyrants gave people the feeling that they were very mysterious. However, Isha Bela's words were a little different. Drunkard Tyrants, what kind of strange species were they? Luoya's head was full of question marks as he thought about the name, but it was the only clue he had at the moment. The other necessary item was Connie from the ancient Austin Empire. Luoya, who was not that interested in alcohol, was also unfamiliar with this wine. This time, when Kadia came, Luoya originally wanted to report the situation of the Akhat family to him, but when he heard that his father would return to the eastern region in 2 days, Luoya, who had a lot to say, became silent. He didn't want to cause trouble for his family. He didn't want his family to worry about him. This is the reason why many people don't tell their family about their difficulties. And now that Kadia is about to return to the border, Roja didn't want him to worry too much. After thinking about it, Roja could only ask about Kadia's understanding of the Sage of Twilight and the Six Disasters. I haven't heard of this before. Is it recorded in an ancient book? Looking at his father, who obviously didn't know anything, Luoya hesitated for a moment, then smiled and attributed this to the random talk he read at home. While the two were chatting, Xiaoluo heard the news and rushed over. The three of them had lunch together. During the lunch, the atmosphere was quite harmonious. Kadia even said a few good words for Xiaoluo and asked Luoya to communicate more with Xiaoluo about the territory, which made the red-haired girl very touched. Uncle Kadia, don't worry. The development of the Akhat territory will be left to me and Luoya. Grabbing Luoya's hand, Xiaoluo patted his chest excitedly as if he was giving a military order. He looked more enthusiastic than Luoya himself, but in fact, it was true. Xiaoluo didn't have any cards in his hand now. He was counting on the development of the Akhat territory to prove his importance. Besides, although there weren't many officials and people in the territory, they still had some say. When they overwhelmingly supported the union between Xiaoluo and Luoya, Kadia, as the Lord, had to consider the interests of the territory and his family. To sum it up, Xiaoluo wanted to keep Luoya as his mistress, the kind of mistress with the whole territory. Kadia knew the reason for Xiaoluo's behavior. He had already promised not to interfere, so he chose to acquiesce. At the same time, he glanced at Luoya, who didn't have any self-awareness at all, and sighed in his heart. It's really strange. Is there a special attack against girls? Kadia didn't understand Luoya's routine, but he was sure that at least for the time being, everything was stable. Luoya, who had recovered from her injury, originally planned to leave with Kadia, but Xiaoluo asked her to stay on the grounds of rehabilitation. Going back with Kadia was equivalent to going to see Ai Lizi. For Xiaoluo, who had experienced this before, it was simply sending a sheep to the tiger's mouth. At least in Rose, Miss Luoya was unwilling to let go. After sending Kadia away, Luoya asked Xiaoluo for the information collected during this period of time and began to study it seriously. It had to be said that as a commercial organization, Sorofia's intelligence network was the most developed in the human world. Before Luoya and Xiaoluo returned, the work of collecting clues had already begun. Now that the first piece of information had been sorted out, it naturally included the details of the so-called Connie wine. Luoya had never heard of Connie wine. In fact, no one else in the current Shia had ever heard of it. The reason was very simple. It was because the name of this wine had changed. The person who came up with the name of this wine was Isha Bela. She was an ancient person who lived hundreds of years ago. In that era, the common language of the people was still the ancient Austin language from the Second Era. It was a language that was more complicated than the modern language, and there were certain differences in pronunciation. The Conti wine mentioned by Isha Bela was gradually narrowed down to Cade wine in the Austin Empire. Cade wine, this was a kind of wine that was almost lost in the Austin Empire. But what surprised Luoya was that the reason it was lost was not because of the difficulty of brewing, but because of the taste. To put it simply, this wine was too disgusting. Wait, this is a mushroom wine. Mushroom? Can this thing be used to brew wine? Looking at the intelligence investigator who came to report, even Luoya couldn't hide his surprise. Hearing his question, the middle-aged intelligence director smiled bitterly. In fact, when he saw this report, he also asked the same question. Yes, sir. In fact, our people personally investigated it. It is indeed an ancient wine with a long history of brewing. But isn't it a bit careless to just make an inference based on the age? That's true, but we found a lot of supporting evidence. Supporting evidence? The black-haired boy looked up at the middle-aged man. The intelligence director and Luoya looked at each other and nodded solemnly. A few hundred years ago, the villages near Sharon Forest had received many large orders for Cade wine. Chapter 217. Since ancient times, archaeology had always been a highly demanding task. In Luoya's previous world, when an ancient antique was unearthed, the experts would often argue endlessly about what it was used for. In Xia, although people live longer, investigating an object from hundreds of years ago was not an easy task. According to legend, Cade wine was a local wine produced in the border forest of the ancient Austin Empire in the Second Era. Its birth brought with it an indescribable taste. Generally speaking, ordinary people would not use mushrooms to make wine, especially the mushrooms called shants, which were used to make Cade wine. They were colorful and beautiful, and the common reaction after eating them was slight dizziness. Yes, this mushroom was slightly poisonous, and the ancient people who used it to make wine were not stupid, but poor. The ancient Austinian Empire was vast, and although it was generally considered the golden age of human development, the living standards of the people in the remote mountainous areas were still very poor. They did not have good land like the Great Plains, and the limited amount of food they had was mostly for consumption. Brewing wine with grain was too extravagant for the mountain people. However, as the saying went, snakes have their own ways, rats have their own ways. Although food was not good, other things in the mountains could be used. After a long time of exploration, people found that this kind of slightly poisonous mushroom wine was the most cost-effective choice. After all, it could not be eaten otherwise. Although it was not very tasty after being made into wine, the toxins were broken down. It was a pure recycling of waste. As the saying goes, freeloading is a form of happiness. Especially when this kind of freeloading is based on recycling waste, it is double the happiness. Because of this, Cardi wine was widely spread in the mountains of the ancient Austin Empire. After humans arrived in the New World in the Third Era, the conditions of the undeveloped mountains allowed the production of this wine to spread on a large scale. However, as the saying went, everything in the world can't escape the law of survival of the fittest. Cade wine was famous for its low cost and easy production in the era when everyone was in trouble. However, as the human world gradually stabilized and the wasteland was turned into farmland, the continuous harvests improved people's living standards rapidly, and Cade wine gradually began to show its weakness. It tasted terrible. Xia's native mushroom wine had a somewhat unique taste, and the fragrance was different from that of traditional grain wine. After having surplus food, people chose to pursue a happy life, and naturally no longer went into the mountains to dig for mushrooms to make wine. Yes, there is no large-scale winemaking anymore. Only the mountain people may make some in their own homes. However, there is a village called Baudre at the edge of Sharon Forest that once produced this wine on a large scale hundreds of years ago. There are even ruins of the winery there. I have to say that Roja was quite lucky. Normally, this kind of winery would be forgotten in history. But fortunately, Padre Town was located in a remote mountainous area and the whole town was poor. The stone building invested by a foreigner was strong and durable. After the order was gone, the winery was abandoned, but no one was willing to tear it down. It was the mayor's office, the militia's arsenal, and now it's used as the church's warehouse. Because it had always been under official management, the process of changing hands was very clear, so Sorofia's investigation was relatively smooth. After many inquiries, the estimated time of production was about 350 years ago, which was around the same time that Luoya and the others found out about the disappearance of the Twilight Sage. And our local investigation team collected a rumor that this wine was once called the werewolf wine, or werewolf nectar. Werewolf nectar? Yes. The source of the rumor was that hunters would occasionally find containers of cade wine in the mountains. They thought it might be because the werewolves of Sharon Forest liked this wine, and over time, it was called werewolf nectar. I see. Luo Ya's eyes widened when he thought of the name Drunkard Tree. He felt that he had guessed the truth of the rumor, and with the support of so much supporting evidence, Luo Ya had completely confirmed his path. First, he would go to Baudre, get the wine, and then head south into Sharon Forest with the information he gathered there. It was now spring, and although Luo Ya didn't know the life schedule of the tree species, according to common sense, plants should be active in spring, so there shouldn't be a problem with the timing. But how did the tree know that he had wine? Did he need to shout from the forest? Luo Ya was very confused about this problem. And how would the tree species taste this mushroom wine? After all, some species of mushrooms grew on trees. Drinking wine made from the fungi on his body, if it was a human under the same conditions, blurg. Luo Ya retched a few times when he thought of the scene. He hurriedly cut off the groundless thought and began to think of more constructive problems, such as how many people should he bring and how to get there. Although Luo Ya didn't believe the rumors of the werewolves in Sharon Forest, there must be a reason for their notoriety. As Sharon Forest was close to the land of chaos, it wasn't a peaceful place. In the past, there were many records of magical creatures descending from the mountains. Luo Ya didn't know how long it would take to find the tree species in the forest, so it naturally wouldn't be like a field trip. On the other hand, Sharon Forest was a notorious gathering place for heretics and cultists in Xia. Although these heretics wouldn't come out easily, it was entirely possible for some organization to establish a stronghold in Sharon Forest. Luo Ya's mission was to search the forest, so the chances of encountering some cultists were quite high. Cultists basically represented evil and evil. As a noble of the theocracy, Luo Ya couldn't avoid encountering them. Therefore, this trip had to focus on military strength. In this regard, Luo Ya currently had three options. The first option was naturally to deploy troops from Akhat territory. The advantage was that his troops were reliable and had a clear command system. The disadvantage was that it would take time and require Kadia's approval. The procedures were complicated, and it would be difficult to find a reason to deploy troops. Akhat's home wasn't connected to Sharon Forest, and he would have to pass through Lo Chase territory. He would also have to disguise himself and go to Austin to buy wine. Passing through two countries at once was very troublesome, and if Austin found out, it would be a big problem. After all, the relationship between the two countries was bad to begin with. If Luo Ya's identity was exposed, they would very likely be treated as invaders. After all, secretly marching troops in the territory of another country was a very stupid thing to do. The second option was Nuwa Ayer's delegation. As the princess of the theocracy, Nuwa Ayer was naturally escorted by guards. It had to be said that this was an elite team led by Archbishop Philip, whom Luo Ya had met once before. They were strong and had a small number of people, so they wouldn't be easily discovered. However, just like the advantages of this team, there were also disadvantages. The members of this team were too powerful for Luo Ya to command. Nuwa Ayer had said yesterday that she needed to return to the front lines as soon as possible, so she definitely wouldn't be able to travel with Luo Ya. The third option was to request assistance from Xiaoluot. Luochai was bordered by Sharon Forest, and as a commercial country, there would be a large number of caravans entering and leaving the Austin Empire in the early spring after a long winter. It wouldn't be a problem to move covertly. However, in terms of guards, Luochai generally used pagan mercenaries. The loyalty of these people would be a problem. After all, in the face of life, sometimes money wasn't that important. It was the greatest tragedy to have money but not have the life to spend it. After thinking for a while, Luoya eliminated the option of deploying troops from his territory. However, he was hesitant about the second and third options until Pei Tila's voice suddenly sounded. "Little guy, you haven't accepted my believers yet?" You have believers too? That's great. Where are they? Can you call them over? Where are they? Aren't they the nearby guards?" The Earth Mother asked in confusion under Luo Ya's shocked gaze. Chapter 218. The Guards in the Vicinity? When Luo Ya heard Pei Tila's question, his mind was a little confused. This was because Luo Ya's living environment had caused him to selectively filter out certain people, and the best example of this was the guards. The job of a guard could be said to be similar to maids. It was an indispensable job in every noble family. However, unlike the maids who had a strong presence, the guards could be said to be cautious and low-key. The guards of the Akkad family were all professionals. Many of them were experienced soldiers who had retired from the battlefield. These people had fewer words compared to the ordinary guards. They only paid attention to one thing, and that was whether there was any danger present. Luoya had long gotten used to this kind of stealth mode, so when he looked at the guards at the door, he couldn't hide the surprise in his heart. Looking at the steel guards, Luoya recalled a conversation with Xiaoluot. He remembered that the guards of the Sorofia family were their long-term partners. They specialized in defense, and they had accompanied Xiaoluot to the Akkad family before. However, this team, like Gulacy, stayed there until the church released them recently. Personal guards hiring heretics was not a crime among nobles, so there wasn't a problem of not being able to hire them. After asking, Luoya found out that the origin substance used by the guards was Pei Tila's perseverance. Perseverance was an origin substance that belonged to the Earth Mother. In the years after Pei Tila's death, it was spread by the Earth Mother. However, as time passed, the successors of Pei Tila were buried in history one after another. Now, only Pei Tila was left in the upper reaches of perseverance. "I thought you already knew, and even came to me because of them." No, they are Xiaoluot's men. Our meeting was purely fate." Luoya waved his hand and told the truth to the Earth Mother. He also asked Pei Tila if there were any buffs like protection. The answer he got was similar to the Gulandair. Pei Tila could even temporarily strengthen the defense of the believers through blessings, which could be said to have improved the defense of this heretic army. The black-haired young man was overjoyed and immediately decided to pull the Church of Perseverance to his side. But he had to admit that this matter was quite difficult and required at least 2 steps. First, Luoya naturally had to discuss with their old employer, Sorofia. Luoya needed Sorofia to be willing to transfer the contract. After that, he had to negotiate with the leader of the Church of Perseverance. To be honest, Luoya was a little nervous about this matter. After all, the mercenaries were considered a part of the National Defense Force. Even if it was just a transfer contract, it would be difficult because this matter wasn't something that Xiaoluot could decide. Instead, it required the approval of the military. Without a doubt, this was a big matter that needed to be discussed with Kadia. For this reason, Luoya made a special trip. "Luoya, didn't we just meet? If there's nothing urgent, I will rest for a while. Father, I found a strong heretic army without any risk and want to absorb them. Now that you mention this, I'm not sleepy anymore." Well, not bad. As the traditional lord of the Akkad family, Kadia immediately became energetic when he heard about Luoya's situation. He immediately prepared to discuss with the Church of Perseverance and strive to come up with a result before leaving. As for Xiaoluot's side, Luoya naturally came personally. But what the young man didn't expect was that the red-haired girl didn't feel embarrassed after hearing Luoya's words. Instead, she was happier than Luoya. "I didn't expect Miss Pei Tila to be the god of the Church of Perseverance. This is great," Charlotte said as she walked closer. She reached out and skillfully hugged the black-haired young man. Leaning on his shoulder, she let out a sigh of relief. Because of their bloodline, Xiaoluot had always been worried about Luoya's safety. One must know that this world didn't only have those sleeping gods, but also their followers and heretics. For example, the Saint Heroes Society or similar organizations might still exist in this era. In the eyes of these people, Luoya was an enemy that must be eliminated. Compared to them who were hiding in the dark, Luoya and the others could only do their best to strengthen the defense around them. Dear, I'm afraid I can't accompany you to Sharon Forest this time. I know, at this time, it's impossible to let the two of us travel alone. Looking at the beautiful girl in front of him who had a criminal record, Luoya helplessly smiled bitterly. Originally, Xia Luo was the most suitable person to travel with Luoya, but her identity as a kidnapper made her disqualified. It's okay. It's good that you stay. The situation in Sharon Forest is uncertain. I'll go check it out first. A few hundred years have passed. We still don't know if the ant is still alive or not. Okay, but promise me, once you discover danger, don't act recklessly. Come back first and we'll discuss. Don't worry. Don't you know me? I'm very steady. Looking at the young man who patted his chest without any self-awareness, Xia Luo's expression was conflicted for a long time before she sighed softly. Do you think that as the only son of a marquis family, you should experience the side effects of dying? Although I can eliminate your side effects, and I'm very happy to be with you every day, but dear, I don't want to see you in pain again. Chapter 219. Young Master Luoya? Is that the young master of the Akate family that we have been protecting? Yes, that's him. Within the Iron Wall Mercenary Corps Armory in Rosetta City, Cynthia, the tall and slender commander, frowned as she looked at the clerk of the corp with dissatisfaction. You want us to be transferred to Akate territory? Are you kidding me? No, this is a notice from the officials of Rosetta City. They said that there was a change in the contract and that it was transferred to Akate territory. They want us to listen to young Master Luoya's orders in the future. As for the salary, that's the theocracy. Cynthia's roar interrupted the clerk's explanation and also shouted out the thoughts of the members nearby. The theocracy of Saint Maester was famous for its stability and ease of living in the human world. It was the base of the Holy See and a place of pilgrimage for thousands of Shia believers. It was beautiful and holy, but for the heretics, the situation was completely different. It was dangerous. Since the twin wars of the theocracy 200 years ago, the heretics began to move out of the theocracy in large numbers. Today, there were very few heretics in the theocracy, and the relevant laws seemed to be stricter. The atmosphere in the theocracy of Saint Maester and Rosetta was completely different. In fact, the Iron Wall Mercenary Corps had been established for so many years, but they had never done any business in the theocracy of Saint Maester. This time, Xia Luo gave them too much money, so they made an exception and accepted it. But this time, they were detained by the theocracy, and they did not expect to get into such big trouble. Can we refuse? At least not in Rosetta. What about money? It's useless. This is the decision of the higher-ups. The old clerk stroked his beard and sighed. He looked at the beautiful commander and said, if you want to refuse, I'm afraid you will have to negotiate. You will have to talk to young Master Luoya face to face. Hey, you want the commander to meet a noble? No, it's too dangerous. The old clerk's words caused an uproar in the room. The members present were all agitated and tried to dissuade her. The reason was simple. Due to Cynthia's beauty and identity as a woman, she rarely saw outsiders, especially nobles. Meeting them often meant trouble. Due to her beautiful appearance and her identity as a female heretic, Cynthia had been pestered by quite a few disgusting nobles in the past. In fact, these nobles would even condescendingly request for her to become their mistress. The moment she thought of this, her stomach was filled with rage. Cynthia was 30 years old this year. As an extraordinaire, she looked like she was 18 years old. It could be said that she was youthful and beautiful. As the daughter of the previous leader, she had been in the mercenary group since she was young and had extraordinary talent. Today, she was already a level 3 source rank expert. If she was a possessor of 3 origin substances, These nobles probably wouldn't have dared to speak to her like this even if they had their guts broken. However, she was a heretic, and discrimination was a common attitude among the nobles, let alone the nobles of the Saint Maester theocracy. In my opinion, there are no good people in the Pope's country. Previously, Morton and his mercenary group didn't even get half of the money because they were heretics. That's nothing. Previously, they were attacked and detained by the regular army because they were marching in the Pope's country. It was the headquarters of Loche's side that collected the money to redeem them. The noise in the room continued. Examples of how the nobles of the Pope's country had harmed the heretics were brought up one after another, causing the brown-haired beauty's face to turn gloomy. Cynthia held her chin as she weighed the pros and cons. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she had to go. As the saying goes, the situation is stronger than the person. Whether it was Loche's side or the Akot family, she couldn't afford to offend them. After a long silence, Cynthia spoke of her decision. I understand. I'll talk to him personally. In the luxurious carriage, the fully armed Cynthia took a deep breath and tried to calm her nervous emotions. This time, she dared to come personally not because she was brave, but because she had carefully considered it. The main reason was that she had once escorted Luoya to Akot. Luoya should be 13 years old this year. At this age, there was a huge gap between him and Cynthia. On the other hand, as a guard, Cynthia had seen the young miss of the Sorofia family act intimately with him more than once. She heard that the two of them were engaged. Now that Luoya was living in the famous bird garden of the Sorofia family, no matter how she looked at it, the Luoya here would not touch her due to etiquette. Otherwise, it would be a public slap to the Sorofia family's face. Even if he had bad intentions, the source rank 3 Cynthia was not afraid. He was just a child. His status might be high, but how much strength could he have when he was spoiled? Moreover, he looked sickly. Chapter 220. The moment Luo Ya's hand touched Cynthia's head, a faint yellow curse appeared on the young man's body out of thin air and rushed into the woman's body through Luo Ya's arm. The next moment, a huge impact made Cynthia's body stiffen. It wasn't an impact caused by an attack. In fact, Luo Ya didn't use any curse at all. It was a kind of suppression. It wasn't the amount of curse power, but the difference in quality. As the original Earth Mother, Pei Tila's power was the purest among all the perseverance source substances. Although the believers who obtained the perseverance source substance after countless years could also enjoy the afterglow, the difference between them and her was very obvious. This was also the reason why the ancient gods could easily affect the downstream units. The power of the Mother Earth was spreading, and from Cynthia's perspective, she had arrived at a valley. The majestic sky-devouring python was slowly appearing in front of her eyes. That was the majesty of the Mother Earth in ancient times, the most primitive manifestation of their power. Anyone who looked at it would feel a sense of subservience, just like the pilgrimage of a believer to the gods. Cynthia's body was in this illusion. The curse power quickly circulated, and the old wound on her abdomen started to heat up. The faint yellow curse power with an indescribable vitality began to fully heal her chronic illness that couldn't be cured with medicine. The brown-haired woman was shocked when she sensed the state of her body. Although the perseverance source substance had the attribute of vitality, she had never seen such pure power before. The recurrence of old injuries was the biggest reason why the average mercenary's life was short. Unlike the physical injuries in Luo Ya's previous life, Shi Ya's injuries were difficult to completely heal due to the curse power. For example, rare poisons, special curses, and bloodline curses. These were things that could stick with you for the rest of your life. Cynthia's abdomen was once injured by a cultist during a mission. The special bloodline curse power completely lost its way after killing the enemy. Although it was suppressed and treated to a certain extent, at midnight, Cynthia would occasionally be awakened by the pain of the old wound. For this kind of injury, the best treatment institution among the people was the church. However, as a cultist, she had no chance. Cynthia herself knew that she might be able to hold on in her prime, but after 100 years, she was terminally ill. This old wound was very likely to be the cause of her death, just like the mercenaries in the group and her father. But today, a sudden change changed her fate. In this unprecedented warmth and blessing, Paytila's voice rang in her ears. Previously, when Cynthia rejected his proposal, Luoya stared at her body. Naturally, it wasn't because he was lustful. In fact, he was observing her through Paytila's power. Instead, he gave her his blessings. This made Cynthia very touched. Recalling Luo Ya's words, the woman's heart no longer doubted him. Instead, she couldn't help but feel a trace of hope. Although the Shia world was large, there were very few nobles who stood on the side of the heretics. Nobles like the Akhat family who owned a territory with real power were even more unheard of. Luo Ya was the Holy Son, so it was impossible for him to betray them. Cynthia and the others might really be able to follow him and get rid of their uncertain lives. If in the future, the theocracy's attitude towards the heretics changed like Luoya said, thinking until here, Cynthia's heart became excited. She slightly changed her squatting posture to kneeling on one knee. She covered her chest with one hand and lowered her head to the black-haired youth. Lord Holy Son, I, Cynthia Ankit, represent the entire Iron Wall army, am willing to pledge my loyalty to you. Chapter 221. Cynthia's loyalty came too quickly, so fast that Luoya couldn't react in time. Obviously, the influence of the gods on the followers of the lower reaches was far beyond Luo Ya's imagination. Of course, part of it was also because of Luo Ya's reputation. It was a reasonable choice for the heretics to follow the Holy Sun because the Holy Sun could communicate with the gods and give them blessings. These benefits were real, not to mention that Luoya was also a powerful feudal lord. Although Seraphia had always treated the heretics well, they still believed in the three origin substances. In times of emergency, they could completely cut off their ties with mercenary groups like the Iron Wall Army. In this regard, Luoya was different. As the Holy Son, he wouldn't abandon the unyielding church. He was truly one of them. Although Cynthia's decision was bold, it was well-founded. Luoya welcomed it and further formulated a plan. Although there was the blessing of Paytila's extraordinary power, people still needed to eat. Material rewards were the most reliable source of motivation. Luoya, who had seen a lot of wolf culture in his previous life but didn't give overtime pay, was very clear about this. With a name, he also needed material rewards. Only then would he be able to exchange for the greatest loyalty. No one was a fool. The Iron Wall Army had been operating in Luot for more than 10 years. Whether it was their network, intelligence network, or station, they had invested a lot. They had even bought a lot of properties. It would be a pity to abandon them. At the very least, Luoya couldn't make Cynthia do such a thing. On the other hand, the Iron Wall Army had been serving as Xia Luot's bodyguards for many years, so he didn't want to change them. Ensuring the loyalty of Xia Luot's bodyguards was not an easy task. After so many years, he might as well continue with it. Otherwise, if something were to happen to Xia Luot, Luoya would regret it for the rest of his life. On the other hand, Luoya had incorporated the Iron Wall Army, which could be considered as having Luoya's men to protect Xia Luot, which could be said to be even more reassuring. Thus, after discussing with Cynthia, Luoya decided on a temporary plan. The Iron Wall Army would be temporarily divided into the Akart Territory Headquarters and the Luo Chateau branch. The Luo Chateau branch would be as per normal, while the Akart Territory would give the soldiers a special mental allowance. Furthermore, the Akart Territory would be fully responsible for the accommodation, training facilities, and living areas. They would even be willing to provide assistance to their relatives. The current Iron Wall Army could be said to be Luo Ya's most important military force, even more so than the Akhat family's own army, because this military force was his personal military force. What was a personal military force? Even if Luoya was not the lord of Akart territory, Cynthia and the rest would still follow him because of his identity as the Holy Son. It was equivalent to being his personal army, which could be said to be the most reliable trump card. Cynthia was extremely moved by Luo Ya's investment in resources and also confirmed her guess. Luo Ya really treated them as his own people. Feeling that she had found the leader of an organization, the young lady discussed with the youth for a few hours. Originally, Luo Ya wanted to invite her for lunch, but seeing Cynthia's heavy armor, he dismissed the idea. After all, the clothes under the armor were not very formal, and it would be impolite for a lady to take off her armor. While they were busy with the incorporation, time slowly passed, and the time for Nuwa Iyer and Kadia to leave was approaching. Seems like it's time to say goodbye again. How is it? Can't bear to part with me. In the reception room of Celta Pavilion, the blonde girl gently took a sip of tea and looked at the youth in front of her with nostalgia. After listening to Nuwa Iyer's words, Luo Ya looked away, and after thinking for a while, he sighed. A little. Oh, I see. I feel that you have become more honest in recent years. I just want to use the time we have to meet effectively. After all, you are still very busy. Indeed, I have been too busy in the past 2 years. Her Royal Highness heard Luo Ya's words and felt a lot of emotions. She touched her cheeks and looked at the youth, and suddenly stood up after a while. Nuwa Iyer? Don't move. The girl's body moved closer to Luo Ya, and her body fragrance made the youth's brain a little dizzy. The blonde girl knelt on the chair and looked down at Luo Ya and reached out her hand to touch his chest. Actually, I think that your sad expression when we parted was very cute, but the parting is a little painful for me. What a contradictory feeling. I say, do you know what I regret the most recently? What? I shouldn't have encouraged you that day. After listening to Nuwa Iyer's wonderful speech, the black-haired youth had a headache and covered his forehead. Miss Angel saw this and smiled. It can't be helped. Your troubled expression is really cute, and it is still the same now. I have said before, don't seduce me like this. Chapter 222. On the first day away from Rose, he missed them. Inside the carriage, Luo Ya was lying on a soft bed, looking at the stars in the sky like a lonely old man. When they left Rose, Xiaoluo specially modified a luxurious carriage for Luo Ya. The exquisite exterior decoration of the carriage was greatly simplified to fit the appearance of a caravan, but a lot of effort was put into the interior. The ceiling was also transformed into an adjustable skylight that allowed one to see the night sky. In addition to being afraid that Luo Ya would be bored, Miss Xia had other plans. For example, she hoped that the beautiful starry sky would remind Luo Ya of the night they spent together in the Warren Mountains, thus strengthening his longing for her. In fact, when Xiaoluo saw Luo Ya send Ai Lizi away, she was relieved. But even so, Xiaoluo could not stop Luo Ya from thinking about his sister, especially when he was traveling alone at night. Another function of the skylight was to divert Luo Ya's attention. However, it turned out that the effect was limited. It had to be said that although the days in Rose City were noisy, Luo Ya actually enjoyed it very much. After all, he ate well and lived well. When he was free, he could be Xiaoluo's model and wear new clothes. Most importantly, Nuwa Iyer and Kadia, who were rarely seen, had returned. Although the atmosphere when everyone gathered together was not very harmonious, it was good for Luo Ya. It was always difficult to part after meeting, let alone leaving the noisy city and coming to the wilderness. At this time, it had been a few hours since they left Rose City. Under the cover of the night, Luo Ya and the others traveled all the way until midnight. According to the habits of caravans, no matter how hurried they were, they should rest at midnight. After all, the wilderness late at night was too dangerous. Not only was it good for bandits, many nocturnal monsters would also start to move during this time. Mr. Luo Ya, who disguised himself as a merchant, naturally did not want to cause more trouble. The caravan stopped at a shelter by the official road to rest. Luo Ya looked at the cloaked figure outside the carriage door and could not help but speak. Cynthia, you don't have to stay here. There shouldn't be any danger tonight. But my lord, it doesn't matter. The public security on the Rosetta Road is pretty good, and it's not far from the city. Don't forget, I'm not completely helpless. I see. I've offended you, Lord Holy Sun. The brown-haired woman nodded slightly upon hearing Luo Ya's words. She couldn't help but feel grateful and respectful. When the Iron Wall army learned that Luo Ya was the Holy Sun who was protected by the gods, their first reaction was actually suspicion. But after more than 10 high-level representatives met Luo Ya under the leadership of Cynthia, this suspicion disappeared. Luo Ya did not let Pei Tila bless them. After all, blessings were like rewards. Luo Ya chose to show his strength in a crowded place. So in the courtyard of the 100 Birds Hall, the Hydra staff used Body of Rebirth for the first time in Luo Ya's peak state. Together with Pei Tila's power, it turned into a 10-meter-long rock python. Facing the god's body that emitted golden light and pressure, the high-level members of the Iron Wall army almost did not dare to look directly at it. They could only crawl down and kowtow. According to Pei Tila, this seemed to be a normal phenomenon. Only Cynthia, who was the highest source level, could barely withstand this pressure. Wait, what about me? How can you be the same as them? Pei Tila's words carried a motherly love, which made Luo Ya blush a little. He felt helpless. Luo Ya was only the Holy Sun in name, but Pei Tila really wanted to be his mother. After a short oracle, Pei Tila disappeared. The mercenaries also changed the object of their kowtow to Luo Ya. This made the black-haired youth feel awkward. He hurriedly asked Cynthia to stop them. It must be known that the high-level members of the Iron Wall army, except for the genius Cynthia, were all old people in their 70s or 80s. No one could stand the sight of them lining up in a row to kowtow. Luo Ya looked at this scene and felt that his lifespan was decreasing. So after some comforting, the old people finally calmed down a little. But when they heard that Luo Ya was going to take them back to Akhat Hill, they began to cry with gratitude. It could not be helped. The pagans who had been wandering for a long time really longed for a stable place to belong. This was a feeling that non-pagans in this era could not understand. First, they knelt together, then they cried together. This scene changed so quickly that the only two young people present, Luo Ya and Cynthia, had a headache. Luo Ya was fine, but Cynthia, as the leader, was flustered. Fortunately, the black-haired youth saw that the situation was not good and changed the topic. He mentioned that they needed guards for this trip. If you say this, I won't cry anymore. When the old people heard this news, they were excited, and then they enthusiastically signed up. The 10 old men who were still crying a second ago were fighting for a place in their team. Some said that their beliefs were firm, some said that their equipment was good, and some said that there were more young people in the team. For a while, they were fighting fiercely. Everything would be different the first time. It was the same for the first guard mission. Because people were lazy, it was normal for the team that they were used to not like to change. In other words, if this mission was done well, the whole team might be directly transferred to the personal army. This was a great honor. The old men naturally knew this truth, so they fought with each other until their faces turned red. Everyone wanted to fight for a chance to be close to Luo Ya for their warriors. After all, they had seen Cynthia's example. Ever since she received the blessing and recovered from her old injuries, Cynthia's spirit and complexion had improved a lot. Furthermore, according to her, the speed of her curse had also increased. This meant that her mutation speed would be faster. According to Cynthia's age, there was even hope for her to break through again in the future. Such a large bonus made people jealous, but the gap between the Iron Wall Army's teams was not very big. For a time, it was difficult to determine who was better. In the end, Luo Ya could not stand it anymore, and simply ordered the teams to be mixed according to the quota. Only then did the Iron Wall Army's thousands of people form an elite team of 30 people. In the team of 30 people, there was 1 source level 3, 20 source level 4, and 9 source level 5. The source level 5 people basically had special bloodline curses or skills, for example, the cooks. That's right, this team. Even the cooks were source level 5. If they were placed in the regular army, they would be considered as the captain. This team could no longer be described as being able to fight. Luo Ya estimated that even her father's personal army was not this fierce. From this point, It could be seen that the unyielding Perseverance Church had some skills. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.